Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Tonight, we're hitting the blacktop through the heart of Texas, where long-forgotten farm roads twist reality and highways lead you back to the same place, again and again. These are the roads you don't read about. On maps, the ones you find by mistake. The ones that don't let you leave. From asphalt that resets time to trails where your headlights never reach the end. These 20 disturbing true stories of Texas roads that loop forever will make you think twice before taking the scenic route. But before we dive in, here's something strange: most viewers make one big mistake. They leave without subscribing, and when they do, they miss the creepiest, most spine-chilling stories we bring every week. Tales that grip you and never let go. Just like the roads we're about to explore. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now. Because tonight's journey is only beginning, and once you're on the road, the only way out might be through the dark. So tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments, because here, the night doesn't end. The road just bends. Let's begin. It was supposed to be a shortcut. That's what the gas station guy said when I asked about the fastest way from Palacios to Bay City. The map apps had all rerouted thanks to a wreck on Highway 35, and I didn't feel like sitting in traffic. Behind blinking hazard lights and orange cones, the old man behind the counter wiped his hands on a towel and pointed with a crooked finger. Take FM 1095. It cuts across the farmland, meets up with 2668. You'll save yourself 20 minutes. Easy. He didn't smile when he said it. Just sort of looked past me, like he was remembering something he didn't care to say out loud. I thanked him anyway, nodded, and headed out into the thick, humid dusk. FM 1095 started quiet. Just too narrow. Lanes and wide open fields. I rolled the windows down and let the warm wind wash through the cab. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the clouds in a bloody orange smear, and for a while it felt peaceful. The radio crackled, switching between stations, but I didn't mind the silence. I've always liked driving alone, especially through rural stretches where it feels like the world isn't watching. The first time I saw the burned car, I thought it was someone's leftover junk. It sat half on the shoulder, nose buried in. A ditch, front end crumpled like it had hit something hard and fast. The whole front half was blackened, melted down to twisted metal and exposed frame. Even the tires were gone, just nubs on scorched rims. I slowed down to look, the way anyone would. You can't help it. There was glass everywhere, glittering in the headlights like frost. But what made me stop completely was the bumper. It was the same make and model as my car. Same year, same color. And on the bent, dented back bumper, I saw the same sticker I had put on mine last summer. A faded red circle with a black silhouette of a surfer. Corpus Christi. The edges were peeling. Exactly the same way. I got out. The air smelled like hot metal and wet ash. I crept toward the car, my boots crunching on gravel. I could see the outline of something in the driver's seat. Slumped forward. The glass on the driver's window had shattered inward. I stepped closer. The face was blackened, scorched beyond recognition, but the shape of the jaw, the cut of the hair, the ring on the left hand. It was me. I don't remember falling, but I hit the ground hard, scraping my palms on the gravel. My vision tunneled. My breath came short and sharp, like I'd been punched in the gut. I got back up, stumbling, my mind screaming for answers it didn't have. I circled the wreck, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The license plate was warped but legible. My plate. I ran back to my car and floored it. No hesitation, no looking back. I flew down the road, trees blurring into one dark mass, my heart hammering like it wanted out of my chest. After 10 minutes of driving, I started to breathe again. I glanced in the rear view. Nothing behind me but the empty road and twilight. I looked at the signs, hoping to see something familiar. A mile marker, a turn. Anything then, I saw it again. The wreck, same spot, same angle. Same burned out shell of my car. I hit the brakes, tires squealing. I hadn't turned, hadn't U-turned, hadn't looped back. I'd driven straight, but there it was, still burning. This time, the fire was alive again. The front seat glowed orange. Smoke curled lazily from the dashboard. And inside, I could see the shape of a man, his head turning slowly toward me. I reversed, tires kicking up dust and rock. The moment I backed up more than 30 feet, the fire blinked out. Just smoke now. Just a corpse. Just me. I drove again, faster this time. Pushed the car hard. Ignored the sound of the engine whining. I watched the odometer tick up, mile after mile. But the road didn't change. No intersections, no signs. Just flat farmland and that same dark stretch of FM 1095. And when I saw the wreck for the third time, something had changed. The body in the car was sitting upright, its head tilted toward me. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I swerved around it and kept going. But it stayed in my mirrors, burning, as if the fire was alive only when I looked away. I drove 4 hours. Each time I thought I'd escaped, I came back to the crash, back to myself. At one point, I tried to pull over and walk. I grabbed my backpack, flashlight, and started down the field toward the tree line, thinking I'd cut across to another road, maybe find help. But when I looked up, there was the road again, the same double yellow line. My car parked on the side, the wreck ahead, waiting. I screamed into the empty air. I cursed the old man at the gas station. I screamed until my throat tore. The next loop. The body was outside the car, lying in the ditch, arms twisted, face blackened. I kept driving. On the 8th pass, the body was standing. On the 10th, it was walking toward the middle of the road. By the 12th, it was waving. I turned off my headlights, hoping the dark would hide me. But it didn't matter. The road kept going, and I kept arriving. Each time, the fire was brighter. Each time, the version of me was closer. On the 15th loop, I crashed. Not because of the figure, not because of the fire, but because the road twisted in a way it never had before, like it was alive, like it didn't want me to leave. The airbag went off. My face stung. My hands shook, and when I crawled out, smoke in my lungs. I looked ahead and saw the wreck again. Not the new one. The same one, still burning, still waiting. I don't know how long I've been here. My phone won't call out. The battery never dies. The gas in my car doesn't run out. Every time I try to leave, I return. There's a copy of me walking the shoulder now, each time I pass. It's closer, soon. I think I'll meet him, and I don't think I'll come back from that. They say you shouldn't take Old Rattler Bend past midnight, not even with a full tank and a clean conscience. It snakes out past Huntsville like a scar the land never healed from, twisting through pine and cedars so thick the moon gets choked. Out, it's not a long road by any means, barely 7 miles from the first crooked warning sign to the rusted cattle gate at the dead end. But if you're unlucky enough to hit it after midnight, you'll swear it goes on forever. And the worst part isn't the darkness or the quiet. It's when the trees start to lean, not sway, not creak, but lean deliberately, as if watching you. Or worse, ushering something else in. I didn't believe any of it. My cousin Wade used to spin tales about the Bend when we were kids, about folks who went in and came back weeks later thinking only hours had passed, about a school bus full of kids that never made it home, even though the tires were found still spinning in the middle of the road. He claimed the bend wasn't always there, that it just showed up one summer in the 60s, paved over a trail no one remembered cutting. I laughed at all of it, until the night I drove it myself. I was heading back from my shift at the truck yard, just outside Conroe. My girl had called, saying the dog had gotten sick again, and I'd already been putting off the vet for 2 weeks. I figured if I took the back roads, I'd save some time and dodge the late-night construction they always seem to be doing on I-45. Old Rattler Bend was marked on the map, though no one really took it anymore. Not unless they were looking to dump trash or smoke weed without getting spotted by the sheriff. I'd ridden it once during daylight. It was rough, but manageable. Quiet, peaceful even. The kind of road you forget 5 minutes after you drive it. That night was different. It started with the silence, the kind that makes your ears ring because there's nothing left to compete with. No frogs, no crickets. Just the hum of my old Ford's engine and the gravel knocking against the wheel wells. The air felt thick, like syrup, and I remember turning the AC off just to see if the heat would help shake that feeling, but it didn't. Then the headlights caught something up ahead's just shadows at first. Tree limbs stretching lower than they should, forming an arch where there hadn't been one before. I slowed down. That's when I saw them lean. The trees weren't blowing in the wind. There was no wind. They bent one by one, like they were, bowing. They leaned in, narrowing the road behind me, and then they started doing the same up ahead. It was like being in the throat of something alive, something that didn't want to let me out. I stopped the truck and thought about backing up, but the side mirrors were pitch black, not from lack of light, but like something had swallowed the beams from behind. No reflection, no brake lights, just black. I tapped the gas, slow, cautious, just trying to get past whatever weird trick the forest was playing. I told myself maybe it was sleep deprivation or stress. That was the reasonable answer. But then the road started to change. The asphalt beneath me cracked and shimmered like water in a heat mirage. My headlights stretched further than they should, hitting the same pine tree over and over again like I was circling instead of moving forward. My GPS blinked out. The dash clock, which had read 12:17 when I first entered the bend, now read 11:03, then 10:12. I pulled my phone from the cup holder dead. Not low battery dead, just blank screen dead. I'd charged it that morning. That's when the static started. It came from the radio, even though it had been off. It's just a low hiss, barely there at first. Then it began to rise. Not like a signal trying to find a station, but like something behind the speakers was exhaling. I reached for the dial, but my fingers went numb before I could touch it. The cold started at the tips and worked its way in. I looked down and saw my breath hanging in the cab like it was January, not July. I turned the wheel to the right, trying to pull into a small turnout I remembered from before, but the tires just kept rolling forward. It was like I wasn't steering. Any more than the voice came through. It wasn't on the radio. It was behind me. You turned too late. Slammed the brakes. Hard, the truck rocked, but didn't stop. It just slowed to a crawl. I looked in the mirror again. Still nothing. Just that thick, absolute black. I twisted in my seat, and there, just behind the bench seat, was a shape. Not a man. Not exactly. It filled the space wrong. Too tall, too narrow, like someone had stuffed a corpse into a suit 2 sizes too small. It didn't move. Just breathed, fogging up the glass with every exhale. I pressed the gas and prayed. The truck surged forward, the road narrowing tighter. Branches clawed at the sides. One scraped across the windshield with a screech that sounded like laughter. The clock on the dash rolled again. 8:45, 7:03. 4:19, I started to cry. Not because I was scared, though I was, but because I realized I didn't know what year it was anymore. I didn't know if my girl was still home waiting with that sick dog, or if I'd driven straight into something time had forgotten. Then the truck stopped. Not because I hit the brakes. It just died. Everything engine, lights, static, dawn. I opened the door and stepped out, knees weak, breath shaking. The trees were still. The air was warm again, but the road behind me was gone. It ended just behind the truck, like the earth had folded it up. Ahead, maybe 20 feet away, was a gate, the kind you'd see at an old ranch, rusted, bent, hanging on one hinge. I didn't remember it from the day I'd driven through before, and there was something standing by it, a figure, tall, unmoving. I couldn't see its face. It raised one arm, slowly, and pointed. I didn't want to go that way, but there was nowhere else left. I walked. Every step felt heavier than the last. My ears rang again. I passed the gate and the figure vanished. Just gone, like it had never been there. Beyond it was a house, rotted down to its bones, sitting at the edge of a clearing. The front door opened before I reached the porch, and inside, I saw myself Dot, older, thinner, sitting in a chair by the window. Eyes hollow, skin gray. He looked at me and smiled. Then he said, "You took the long way home." I ran. I don't know how long or how far. The trees leaned back to let me pass, just enough. The road uncoiled, unwinding like ribbon behind me. I found my truck again, still dead, still cold, but I got in and tried the key anyway. It turned, the engine roared. The clock blinked to 17 a.m. The GPS was back. My phone buzzed with missed calls. I floored it by the time I reached the main road. The sky was lightening and birds had started to sing. That was 3 weeks ago. Haven't driven since. But sometimes, when I'm up late and the wind picks up outside, I hear the trees shifting, leaning like they're waiting, like they remember. And the clock in my kitchen, it still runs backward on rainy nights. He wasn't even supposed to be out that late. Mark had told himself he'd leave the lake house before dark, but sunset crept up quicker than he expected. Possum Kingdom Lake was quiet this time of year, all the tourists gone and the cabins. Empty except for a few, like his friend Joey, who still made the drive out for fishing, drinking, or just plain hiding. The weekend had been uneventful. Beer, bad Wi-Fi, and stories about high school days that no longer mattered. Joey passed out around 7, and Mark decided to head back to Dallas before the fog rolled in. He didn't like country roads after dark, not since that wreck 3 years ago outside Hillsboro. Sometimes he still dreamed of glass cracking like ice and headlights spinning like a carousel. He filled up at a station near Graham. A dusty place with a flickering LED sign and a cashier who looked like she'd been carved from wax. She didn't say a word, just stared. That should have been the first clue. But Mark had a playlist queued up, his coffee warm in the queue folder. And nothing on his mind but work on Monday. The first time it happened, he figured it was just déjà vu. He turned onto FM 1148, headed southeast, skirting the lake. He passed a closed-down gas station with a broken ice chest outside and a single pump leaning like a snapped tree. There was a stray dog nosing through a fast food bag, brown and matted, ribs poking through. A little further, he saw a woman hitchhiking. She wore a denim jacket too big for her frame and held a cardboard sign that said Simply East. Her hair was long, black, tangled. She didn't look up when he passed. He checked the clock. 8:16 p.m. 5 miles later, he took the next turn, then blinked. Same gas station, same bent pump. Same dog chewing the same wrapper. He slowed this time. The hairs on his arms lifted like a static charge was building in the car. The woman was there again too, still holding her sign. This time she looked up, just for a second. Her eyes were hollow. Not tired, hollow, as if someone had scooped the life out of her with a spoon. He didn't stop. Who would? He tapped his brakes. No turns, no pull-offs. Nothing but old fence lines and the dark water of the lake flashing between breaks in the cedar trees. He cursed under his breath, turned off the music, and kept driving. Next 5 miles, same thing. Gas station. Dog woman. Third time. Fourth. Fifth. By the 6th loop, Mark started sweating through his shirt. The air inside the truck felt thinner. The windows wouldn't roll down. He tried turning around, but the road twisted back on itself no matter what he did. GPS was dead. Phone stuck at 8:16 p.m. No signal. The battery icon blinked like it was mocking him. He threw the phone onto the passenger seat and gripped the wheel tighter. He told himself it was a trick of exhaustion, or maybe there really were a lot of similar buildings out here in the Texas backwoods. But the dog had the same limp, the same exact wrapper sticking to its nose, the same puddle of dark soda beneath it, attracting the same hornet. He tried talking to himself to stay sane. He recited sports stats. He sang commercials. He slapped his cheeks and yelled at the trees. By the 9th loop, the woman was closer to the road. Her sign was gone. Her mouth was open wide in a silent scream. Her eyes never blinked. Mark swerved and nearly hit the ditch. Gravel spat behind him. 10th loop. He stopped. Right in front of the station, he opened the door. It creaked like something out of a movie. The heat outside was unbearable, like the asphalt itself was breathing. The dog turned and looked at him. Not like a dog, like a person wearing a dog's skin. Its eyes were too round, too knowing. It padded behind the ice chest and vanished. He walked past it, toward the station. The windows were so caked with grime they looked painted. Inside, the light buzzed like a trapped wasp. He could see the same woman from earlier now behind the counter. She was the same hitchhiker, no doubt. Same jacket, same face, except her hands were red, not just dirty red. Wet, she smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was just wide. He didn't. Go in. 11th loop. The sky hadn't changed. The same orange-purple haze from sunset. The same shadows stretching too long across the road. This time, the woman was in the middle of the road, arms at her sides, eyes on him the whole time. He braked, heart pounding. T laid on the horn. She didn't move. He gunned the engine and veered around her, tires screaming. When he checked the mirror, she was gone. 12th loop. She was in the truck, passenger seat buckled in. Hair wet and dripping on his dashboard, Mark screamed, swerved into the gravel, slammed the brakes. She didn't flinch. Her mouth opened, slow and wide, and something crawled out. Not a sound, not a word. Just this long, tar-colored tendril, like a worm made of smoke. It hovered in the air, dancing like a flame in reverse. He bailed out of the truck, falling hard onto the asphalt. His knees scraped raw. He didn't look back. He just ran. There was no house. No people. No sound except his own breathing and the buzz of insects that seemed to get louder the further he got from the road. He ran until the trees thickened and the sky seemed to crackle with heat. And then the road was there again. Gas station. Dog. Woman. The truck was gone, so was his phone. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. Just a wheeze. He walked this time. All 5 miles. The gas station behind him. The lake always to his left, like it was following him. Not the other way around. When he finally saw headlights, he waved both arms and collapsed onto his knees in the center of the road. A pickup slowed. A man leaned out the window. Said he looked lost. Mark sobbed. Tried to explain. The loops, the woman, the hitchhiker. The dog? The man listened, nodded slowly. "You passed her test, I guess," he said. "What? Test?" The man looked over Mark's shoulder. His eyes went wide. "Oh, maybe not." Mark turned Dot. She was there closer than she'd ever been. Not smiling, not screaming. Just waiting, and then the road looped again. This time without Mark. But the dog was still there, the gas station still broken, and the woman still hitchhiking, holding a sign that now read just one word: again. He hadn't meant to take Route 281 that night. Travis was supposed to be in Johnson City by 8, meeting an old friend for beers at a place called Whistling Jack's. But there'd been an accident on the highway, a jackknifed semi-hauling gravel that shut down traffic in both directions. His GPS rerouted him through the hill country, slicing south down 281, past stretches of barbed wire and limestone fences, where the land dipped and rolled like an old bedsheet kicked up at the corners. It was quiet country, beautiful in the daylight. But at night, especially alone, it took on a different tone. The first time he passed the pasture, he didn't think much of it. Just a long expanse of fenced-in land, dotted with a dozen or so black Angus cows, clustered by the fence, like they were waiting for something. Their dark bodies barely registered in the twilight, but their eyes caught the beam of his headlights, twin reflections flickering like sparks in a mine shaft. One cow stood closer than the rest, pressed tight against the fence, its muzzle lifted, slightly as if sniffing the air or maybe listening. Travis caught a glimpse of a cattle tag, yellow, dirty, bent at the corner before he rolled past and dipped down into the next curve. 5 minutes later, after a long bend near a creek, bed and an unlit intersection, he saw the same pasture again. The same fence, the same cows. He slowed a little. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel. Had he turned wrong? He didn't remember seeing a fork. He flicked his eyes to the GPS screen. No signal. Just a red slash through the top bar, and a frozen blue dot parked on a blank stretch of road. He tapped the screen. Nothing. The cow was still there, same spot, pressed against the fence. But this time its head was turned, not up toward him, eyes wide, staring straight into the windshield, like it knew something he didn't. He accelerated slightly and drove past without looking back. 10 minutes later, he came up on the pasture. Again, this time the cows were all facing away, their backs to the road, rigid and still like statues. None of them moved. None of them grazed. Travis slowed the truck to a crawl and stared through the passenger window, trying to find the turnoff. He must have missed, but there was nothing. No landmarks. Just the same low barbed wire fence, the same slope of land, and the same damned cows. Except now, each one had its head down, legs stiff, tails unmoving. It was like they'd been placed there. He stopped the truck completely and cut the engine. Total silence dropped over him like a net. No wind, no insects, not even the ticking of the engine cooling down. Just an oppressive, suffocating stillness. He opened the door and stepped out into the gravel, the sound of his boots oddly loud. The cows didn't react. Not one turned to look at him. He walked to the fence and gripped the top wire, which buzzed faintly with an electric hum. Not strong enough to hurt, but enough to feel. Across the field, the sky was turning darker, a deep blue that bled into black. His eyes scanned the horizon. No house, no barn, no water trough, no indication that anyone lived nearby or tended the cattle. It was just empty land and a herd that didn't blink. He turned back toward the truck and froze. The driver's side. Door was shut. He hadn't shut it. He knew he hadn't. He never left it that way. He always left it ajar when stopping briefly. And now it was sealed, tight, like someone had crept up and pushed it closed. He walked back slowly, eyes darting toward the field, then the trees lining the road. Nothing moved. He opened the door again, climbed in, and slammed it shut. This time, deliberately. His hand trembled as he turned the key. The truck cranked, sputtered, then roared to life. He made a U-turn, tires crunching over the gravel, and headed back the way he came. Or so he thought. 15 minutes later, he passed the same damned pasture. This time, the cows were all lying, down, lined up in a perfect row along the fence. Their heads were pointed west, toward the setting sun. Not one of them blinked. Their eyes were open and glassy, like they'd been dead for hours. He screamed a curse and punched the steering wheel, nearly swerving off the road. The GPS still had no signal. His phone was down to 4% battery and couldn't pull up. A single map, no signs, no mile markers. He hadn't seen another car in almost an hour. Travis floored it, speeding past the field, ignoring the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach. Something was wrong here. This wasn't just a missed turn or a faulty GPS. This was something deeper, older, like the road itself had coiled around him. Another turn, another dip, and then the pasture again. Now all the cows were standing in the road, lined up, shoulder to shoulder, blocking the entire 2-lane stretch. They didn't move. They didn't even seem to breathe. He slammed on the brakes, tires screeching as the truck skidded to a stop mere feet from the nearest one. The cow turned its head and smiled, not with lips, not like a cartoon. But something beneath the flesh shifted and its mouth curled unnaturally at the corners. The eyes were wrong too. To round, to human. Travis recoiled in his seat, heart hammering, fingers scrambling for the gear shift. The cows began walking forward, slowly, hooves echoing off the pavement. One by one, they peeled off toward the ditches, clearing a path. But as they moved, each one turned its head toward him, that same unnatural curl pulling at their faces. Those human-like eyes boring into his soul. He drove through them, teeth clenched, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. He didn't look in the rearview mirror. The next pasture was empty. No cows, just the field. Quiet and still, like it had never been touched. Not a single hoofprint, not a tuft of torn grass, as if they'd never been there at all. Travis drove. Another 20 minutes before he saw headlights coming toward him. Relief flooded his chest. He flashed his brights once, then again. The oncoming vehicle didn't flash back. As it passed, he saw that it was his own truck. Same color, same dented fender. Same faded bumper sticker from his college days. The driver looked just like him too, but the eyes were different. Hollow, bloodshot, wide, and unblinking. He slammed the brakes, spun the wheel, and turned to chase the other vehicle. But there was nothing there. Only the pasture. This time, the fence was gone. The cows were gone. And in their place stood rows of wooden crosses, each one with a number carved crudely into the surface. At the base of every cross, a small mound of dirt, freshly turned, damp, still steaming. He drove until the sun came up, but the road never ended. The truck's fuel gauge never moved. His phone died at 3:17 a.m. and refused to power back on. Every few miles, he saw something familiar. A discarded glove in the same spot, a mailbox with the flag forever up, a torn road sign that read Blanco to 12 miles no matter how far he drove. And once an hour, like clockwork, he passed that damned pasture again. The cows never returned, but the crosses multiplied, and every time he passed, one more bore his name. You don't stumble onto FM 666 unless you're lost or stubborn or something's already wrong with you. That stretch of highway, barely paved and never lit. Cuts through the mesquite and scrubland like a scar no one wants to acknowledge. Locals call it the Ghost Mile, though it runs a little longer than that. Doesn't matter. 1 mile's all it takes. The road veers off an unmarked turn outside of Alice, Texas, through a rusted cattle gate that always seems open, even if you swear it wasn't a moment ago. And once you take it, once your tires hit that cracked blacktop with the faint white striping that fades halfway through, you've made a decision you can't undo. Robbie Merrill wasn't from Alice. He was from Rockport, 3 hours southeast, and had never heard of the Ghost Mile. He was on his way to Laredo, avoiding the interstate because he hated traffic and liked the lonely hum of country roads. His father used to take the long way on every trip, saying, "Real roads had dust on them and turned your windows red from the clay." Robbie thought about that often, especially on nights like this, when the air was thick and the map on his phone stopped working. He'd been following a blue line down Highway 44 when a detour sign leaned crooked across the road. It was hand-painted, 1 arrow. No explanation, he followed it. His GPS spun for 10 seconds and then went black. When he looked up again, the trees looked different, denser, pressing in. FM 6066 wasn't marked, but the pavement changed under his wheels, and that subtle shift in traction, that slight hum in the steering column, told him this wasn't the same road. But he kept going. That was his first mistake. He saw the mile marker right before it vanished in his rear view. Just a plain steel post that read Mile 1, but with something else scratched beneath it. Letters, barely visible in the flickering wash of his headlights. A smear of grayish-white moved across the field to his right. He thought it was a deer until it turned and stood upright. Just a man, pale and lanky, shirtless in the cold night, facing away from the road. Robbie didn't stop, didn't even slow. He gripped the wheel tighter and told himself people did weird things out here. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was on something. Wasn't his business. That's when he noticed the sound. It was faint. At first, like a second set of tires, mimicking his turns, echoing the rumble of his own. He turned off the radio and rolled down the window, just enough to hear. There it was again. A step, then another. Like someone pacing beside the car, he leaned closer to the glass and looked out, but the roadside was empty. Dry grass and twisted. Fence posts, nothing more. But every few seconds, he heard it. Crunch, step, shuffle. Always to his left, always keeping pace. He hit the gas harder, pushing 60, then 70. The steps grew louder, and now there was breathing. That's when he saw the shape in the side mirror, faint, like fog caught in motion. But it was there. A head, a shoulder, an arm swinging in rhythm with each step. And it wasn't falling behind. It was keeping up. He drove faster. FM 666 didn't seem to end. That was the strangest part. No turns, no intersections. Just the same. Straight line stretching on forever. The dashboard clock stopped changing. The temperature gauge flickered and died. His phone wouldn't turn on. And outside, that shape was still running. No face, just blur. But it had arms. It had legs. It was following him when he passed the same twisted oak tree for the 3rd time. Robbie realized something was wrong. Not just wrong, but broken. Bent, the tree was unmistakable. Huge, half-dead, with a coil of rusted barbed wire wrapped around its base like a crown. It wasn't just similar, it was the same. Even the shadow it cast across the road was identical. He slowed the car and looked around. Same tree, same ditch. Same cracked section of pavement with a dark stain like blood soaked into it. That's when he passed the mile marker again. Mile 1, same spot. Same scratches. but now he could read them clearly. Don't drive IT twice. His stomach dropped. The shape outside the window was closer now, moving slower, walking, but its pace matched his speed. 20 miles an hour, still right there beside him. He swerved. The car bounced hard against the edge of the road. The tires kicked up gravel. His mirror caught the figure for just a second longer, and in that brief flash, he saw a face. Not a monster, not a demon. It was him, same jawline, same scar on the cheek, same red hoodie he was wearing. Only the eyes were wrong. Empty, hollow, like they had been scooped out. He screamed and floored it. For 5 minutes or an hour or a day, Robbie drove as fast as he could, refusing to look left, gripping the wheel until his knuckles went white. He passed the oak tree again, the same dead possum in the road, the same flickering speed limit sign. And then the shape was gone. Silence.fm 666 curved to the right. For the first time, a familiar road appeared, marked by a green sign for Highway 44. His phone vibrated to life. The dashboard clock blinked and corrected itself. It was 2:17 a.m. He had lost an hour, maybe more. He didn't stop driving until he reached Laredo. Parked outside a motel, vomited in the bushes. He didn't tell anyone what happened, not even the clerk who handed him a room key with a sympathetic glance. He barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that other version of himself walking in the dark, matching his every move. 2 weeks later, he was back home in Rockport, washing his car, when he saw the footprints, dusty, bare, like someone had walked beside the vehicle, around the driver's side. The prints ended at the rear wheel and didn't go any farther, but they were fresh, still damp, like the person had just walked away. He locked the car. Didn't drive for a while, but something followed him. He'd hear steps behind him in the backyard. The reflection in the mirror would blink out of sync. And some nights, when he checked the security camera feed, there would be motion on the side of the house. Always at 2:17 a.m., always shadow-shaped, always with that same slow walk. He tried to destroy the footage. The file wouldn't delete. He asked a friend to drive the same road, but they laughed. Said FM 606 didn't exist. Said there was no such road outside Alice. He went back. Couldn't find the turn. The cattle gate was gone. Nothing but barbed fence and brush for miles. That night, he dreamed of driving again, not as himself. From the outside, as if he were the thing walking beside the car, looking in, smiling, waiting. And when he woke up, the hoodie he'd worn that night, the red one, was gone. A week later, his neighbor swore she saw someone standing beside his car in the driveway. Thought it was him, until she waved and the figure just kept walking. She said it was like seeing a ghost. No features, just presence. Robbie didn't respond. He was already packing, but there's no running from FM 666. Once you've driven it twice, it knows you. It walks with you. Sometimes it walks for you. And sooner or later, you'll pass that same tree again, and the mile marker will read something new. Just one word: return. The sun hadn't even cracked the horizon when Rick Alvarez climbed into his rig and turned the key. It was a beat-up Peterbilt assigned to him for night hauls between Pecos and the drill pads in Crane. His schedule had been screwed the night before due to a busted flowback valve, and now he was playing catch-up with a double shift, running a full tank of slick water and sand mix to a newer site nestled somewhere off. FM 1053. The drive was supposed to take him less than 2 hours each way. Instead, Rick would spend the next 9 spiraling into something that would change how he saw roads, time, and death forever. He hadn't planned to take the shortcut. In fact, dispatch explicitly told him to avoid it. A washed-out segment of County Road C R118, used mostly by locals who thought they knew better than the map. Still, when Rick saw the low loader jackknifed across the main access road and a construction crew flagging traffic away, he muttered a curse and swung the wheel east. He figured if he kept to CR 118 for about 30 miles, he'd loop back around and hit the lease road from the south. A little longer, but not too bad. It was around 4:17 a.m. when he first noticed the armadillo. It wasn't the first dead animal he'd seen on a Texas road. Most frack haulers were used to its mirrored jackrabbits, deer torsos missing everything below the ribcage, and the occasional blood slick of some poor ranch dog. But this armadillo was different. It was whole, perfect, almost. Curled on its side legs up, frozen mid-scuttle. Its eyes were glossy, as if it had just died minutes ago. Rick passed it without much thought, only noting that it looked too clean for the amount of oilfield traffic out here. About 30 minutes later, still cruising at a steady 45 under a pitch-black canopy, he saw it again. Same armadillo. Same spot. No tire marks near it. No blood trail. Just curled, glassy-eyed, and waiting. He shook it off at first, figuring he'd looped back onto CR 1018 without realizing. It happened especially on these sleepy roads. But the next time, he knew something was wrong. This time, he remembered a mile marker rusted green pole with the number 312 barely visible under the dirt crust. He passed it right after seeing the armadillo. Then, the road curved right, dipped near an old caliche pit, and leveled out. It was about 5 minutes after that when the same stretch came again. Mile 312. Dip, pit. Armadillo Rick pulled the truck to the shoulder, cut the engine, and rubbed his eyes. He sat in silence, the only sound the hiss of coolant ticking under the hood. His hands gripped the steering wheel until the leather dug into his palms. After a minute, he stepped out into the morning chill. The wind was still, too still. Number? Crickets, no distant pump jacks groaning, just nothing. The kind of silence that made your ears ring. He approached the armadillo slowly, flashlight in hand. It wasn't decomposed, didn't smell. The shell looked waxy, almost like it had been painted. He nudged it with the toe of his boot. Nothing, no give. He kicked it harder. It slid a few inches, but didn't turn. No blood on the asphalt, just that same dead pose. Too neat to be natural. He got back in the cab and turned around. The rig was heavy, but he managed a rough three-point turn and headed back the way he came. He figured maybe he'd taken a wrong fork. Maybe Google Maps rerouted him into some loop. It was now creeping past 5:15. His radio crackled, but it was only static. 10 minutes later, he passed the mile marker again. 312. Then the pit. Then the armadillo. He hit the brakes so hard, the rig skidded. The whole cab lurched. He stared at the road ahead. There were no other lights, no intersections, nothing but scrubland and darkness. He reversed. Drove back a mile. Turned, tried again. Same pattern. 312. Pit. Armadillo. Around the third hour, his nerves started to fray. He turned off the lights and waited in the dark, hoping maybe the road would change if he stopped moving. He even walked a half-mile down the asphalt with a flare in hand, scanning the terrain for any clue, a sign, a bend in the road, a noise. He found nothing but that damn silence and the oppressive sense that something was watching him from the brush. Not an animal, not a person, just something. Standing just behind the veil of trees. He got back in the truck and kept driving by. The 5th hour, his dash clock blinked erratically. His phone screen cracked while sitting untouched on the passenger seat. The vents stopped blowing warm air and instead sputtered out something stale and cold. Like it had been pumped from a basement. It was nearly 9:30 a.m. when he started talking out loud, trying to keep sane. He called out to the air, to the road, to whoever or whatever had put him there. He cursed, he begged, he laughed, dry and cracked, his throat raw. And still, mile 312 came. The pit, the armadillo, on what must have been the 9th hour. Rick swerved off the road entirely. He floored the gas and barreled across the scrub. The rig bounced, skidding over cactus and rock, but he didn't care. He aimed for anything other than that endless stretch. The steering wheel jerked. Something slammed into the underside of the truck. The engine sputtered, then stopped. When he woke up, the cab smelled like burnt plastic. His windshield was cracked. The seat beside him was soaked not with water, not with oil, but something dark and thick. He didn't remember bleeding. He didn't remember crashing. But the rig was resting in the exact center of the road again, pointed forward. Mile marker 312 stood right outside the window. The armadillo was at the bumper. Untouched, Rick didn't try to drive after that. He climbed out, took the flashlight, and started walking. He walked north, west, then east, trying to find anything offense. A ranch gate, a radio tower blinking on the horizon. But every direction led him back to the road. And each time, the armadillo was a little closer to the center. Its pose changed. One leg outstretched. The head turned slightly. Mouth parted, as if about to speak. At some point, he blacked out again. He was found 3 days later by a water hauler named Mitchell. Clay Rick was curled up in the cab, shivering, mumbling something about the same damn animal. His rig was on a different road entirely, half a mile off CR 113. The shortcut was never found, and no one could explain how his GPS showed 612 miles traveled in circles. The truck's odometer was reset to 0. Rick never drove again. He moved to El Paso, took a job stacking shelves at a warehouse, and refused to talk about what happened that night. But once, years later, someone said they saw him sitting on the curb outside the warehouse lot, staring down a drainage ditch where an armadillo lay curled in the exact same way. Perfect, glossy-eyed, waiting. The loop wasn't on any map. That's what caught Mason's eye first. He'd been driving since late morning, trying to make it to his cousin's ranch in Giddings before dark, and the phone said he was making good time. Somewhere after Caldwell. The GPS glitched, then came back. That happened a lot in these rural patches of Texas, especially once you got close to old oil roads and forgotten farming towns. He passed through Denville and thought about stopping. But the gas needle was still above a quarter, and the heat wasn't too bad yet. Then came Dimebox. It was more a cluster of weathered homes and trailers than a town. One post office, one sign with bullet holes spelling out the name, and one gas station that looked like it hadn't seen a delivery truck in weeks. He didn't stop. He just passed through, watching the trees stretch taller and closer together on both sides, like they were slowly trying to close the road behind him. That's when he saw the sign. It was green like a normal highway marker, but there was no name on it. Just an arrow pointing left, with a weather-faded white loop drawn in chalky lines. No highway number, no city ahead, no mileage. Just the loop. And when Mason's GPS flickered again, he noticed something odd. The remaining time on the screen didn't drop like it should have. It went up by 1 minute, then another, then 2. The road itself seemed smoother than the cracked and patched stretch of FM 141 he'd been on. It curved left sharply, dipping into a shade-drenched path where the trees locked their branches above. It felt wrong, but the detour also looked faster. The GPS rerouted and said he'd save 15 minutes. He took the turn. Almost immediately, the sunlight changed. It turned a hazy yellow, like he'd driven through a filter. The shadows thickened. The road narrowed. No traffic. No signs. No power poles. Just him and the two-lane blacktop that now had no lane markers. That wasn't uncommon out here. Some back roads just faded that way. But he realized the GPS was doing something stranger now. It wasn't just rerouting. The distance to the destination was decreasing, but the time was increasing. Every mile closer to Giddings took him 2 minutes further from arriving. He reset. The app, it opened again, paused, recalculated, and then began counting backwards. 40 minutes, 39, 41, 40-3. He cursed under his breath, pulled over, and took a screenshot. Then he turned the phone off and back on. The road ahead sloped gently uphill, and he figured once he crested that ridge, he'd be able to get a signal again. Maybe see a water tower or cell tower. Something. Anything. He crested the hill. Road dipped into a fog he hadn't seen before. It pooled in the shallow gully ahead like smoke. Mason slowed down. The heat of the day should have burned off any mist by now. He glanced in the rearview mirror. The road behind was clear. No fog, but the road in front of him, thick as soup. He drove in. The air grew cooler. Not just a little, enough to fog the edges of the windshield. Mason turned on the defroster, then the heat. That's when the radio, which had been quiet since Brian, flickered to life. It wasn't a station, just static. Then a voice. Not a worded voice, a whisper. Hissing consonants and soft vowels that didn't line up into anything clear. He changed. The station, it followed him. Every number, same voice, same hiss. Then it stopped, and the road opened. Except it was the same stretch he'd just driven. Same split rail fence on the left. Same bent mailbox with no house nearby. Same tree stump split with rusted iron wedged in the center. He was sure of it. He'd noticed it the first time because the mailbox said booth in faint carved letters. Mason slowed and looked again. Booth, same spot. Same exact placement. He hadn't looped back. He hadn't turned around. He hadn't seen any intersections. Just one road forward. One road that curved like a snake's spine, guiding him deeper. He pulled over again. This time, he checked the compass on his phone. It spun wildly. Then it settled. South. He knew that wasn't right. He had been heading northeast. He'd turned west at most. Not south, but the needle didn't budge. He waited 5 minutes. Nothing changed. Then the fog came again, from behind. It rolled low and fast, covering the fields and fencing until it was brushing against his bumper. He started the truck, heart thudding harder now, and drove again. This time he kept the speed up, 50, 55. The road didn't widen. It didn't merge. It just kept curving left. The third time he passed the booth mailbox, he didn't stop. He started muttering to himself, cracking the window even though it was freezing now. The radio was back to static, louder this time, the whispers turning into gasps like someone sucking wind after a long run. He turned it off. It turned itself back on. The fog followed. On the fourth loop, the mailbox was gone. The stump was still there. The fence was there, but the mailbox was missing. He slowed enough to scan the ditch. Nothing. That's when the sun blinked out behind the clouds. It wasn't gradual. 1 minute, it was late afternoon. The next, it looked like dusk, with a flat, yellow wash across the landscape like an old Polaroid losing color. The trees seemed taller now. The branches hung lower. They weren't the same trees. These had black bark and no leaves, like winter had hit just that patch of road. Mason drove faster. 55, 60. 65, he didn't recognize anything now. The fog came from ahead, this time not behind. It swallowed the fence, the stump, the edge of the road. And when he drove into it, he saw her, a girl, 12 or 13, standing on the shoulder barefoot. Her dress was white but smeared with red. Not blood, mud maybe. Her hair was wet. It hung in thick ropes across her face. She looked up as his headlights hit her, and her eyes were wrong. Not glowing, just black. Not like the color black. Like a hole where the eyes should be. He swerved. Around her, tires skidding off the road for a second before biting back into the pavement. He didn't stop, didn't slow. She was gone when he looked back. The fifth loop had no stump, no fence, just one mailbox. And this time, it didn't say Booth, it said Mason. He slammed the brakes and stared. He got out. The air outside smelled like mildew and wet dirt, like a cellar that hadn't been opened in years. He approached the mailbox. It was rusted, shut. He pulled it open. Inside was his phone. The same one he had in the truck. Same green case, same chipped corner. The screen was lit. The GPS was running. And it said, arriving in 5 hours and 13 minutes. The number ticked up 5:14, 5:15, 5:17. He dropped it and ran back to the truck. Got in. The phone in the cup holder was off. Wouldn't turn on now. Dead? He threw it into the passenger seat and drove. No mailbox on the sixth loop. No fence. No girl. Just the loop. And now the trees weren't trees. They were shapes. Tall, black, motionless shapes. They leaned in. No wind, but they moved. Like they were watching. Or listening on the seventh loop. The truck ran out of gas. He coasted to a stop near a sharp bend where the fog pulsed like breath. He sat there, didn't move, didn't breathe. He waited for it, for whatever came next. He saw lights, headlights, behind him. Bright, sharp. But they made no noise. No engine, just light. Then a horn. He opened the door and stepped out. Raised his hands. Maybe they could help. Maybe this was the way out. The car that came around the bend was his. Same truck, same dent on the side, same sticker on the bumper, same green phone in the dash. It didn't slow down. He screamed, but no sound came. The truck passed through him like he wasn't there. The fog swallowed both, and the loop continued. He had been driving since Beaumont. 10 solid hours, no stops, save for gas and one coffee he barely drank. It had gone cold fast, like everything else in the car. The AC was busted and the windows refused to roll all the way down. His name was Darren Mitchell, a chemical sales rep who knew Southeast Texas like the back of his hand, or thought he did. He'd taken Highway 59 100 times. He could tell you which towns had good barbecue and which had rest stops. You wouldn't. Want to pee behind? But that Thursday, sometime after 9 p.m., when the sun had sunk behind the woods and the blacktop shimmered with ghost heat, something changed. He was heading north, trying to make it to Carthage before midnight. His boss had booked him a room there. Cheap place, some Motel 6 knockoff where the carpet smelled like wet dog. He didn't care. He just wanted sleep. He was sick of the road and sick of his own voice in his head. His wife had left a voicemail. Earlier in the day, something about needing time. He hadn't listened to the whole thing. Maybe later, after a drink. Maybe never. The first time he saw mile marker 214. It was half lit by his high beams, standing lonely on the shoulder, like it always did. Nothing special. He checked the time, 9:12 p.m. He was zoning out to some scratchy AM radio, listening to a preacher scream about serpents in the world. He passed the sign and kept going. 20 minutes later, he saw it again. same number, same tilt to the left. But he hadn't made any turns. He squinted at the speedometer. He was doing 65 steady. He'd passed maybe 3 trucks, one closed-down bait shop, and a possum carcass that looked half melted into the road. He chalked it up to being tired. Maybe the signs were numbered wrong. Wouldn't be the first time Texas had screwed up. He kept driving. Then he passed it a third time. It was unmistakable now. The reflective paint on the numbers was smeared, like someone had tried to claw them off. The pole looked rustier than before, bent at the same angle, but now the base was wrapped in what looked like old fishing line. His headlights flickered as he passed, and something in the passenger side mirror glinted something small and low to the ground, crouching just beyond the tree line. He gripped the wheel tighter and shut off the radio. Silence poured into the car like water in a sinking ship. He slowed down. The mile markers should have been climbing 215 to 16, but they didn't. The next one he saw was 214 again. This time, it was different. There was a black handprint smeared across the numbers, fresh, still wet-looking. He thought about pulling over, checking it out, maybe snapping a photo to send to someone. But his gut told him to keep driving. That same gut that clenched up. The day his brother drowned in Lake Livingston. That same twist in the stomach he got when the doctor said it's not just stress, it's cancer. Darren trusted that feeling. It never lied. He drove another 10 minutes. No sign of 215. No towns. No exits, not even the possum. Just the dark. Thick trees pressing in from both sides and that stretch of asphalt that started to feel like a treadmill. Under his wheels, then the lights behind him showed up. They weren't headlights, at least not normal ones. They were too far apart, too high up, and they had a color that didn't belong on the road, pale green, like the underbelly of a dying frog. They didn't move closer or farther. They just hovered behind him. He watched them in the rearview mirror for 10 straight minutes. No car ever came. Just those lights, bouncing a little like something on legs, not wheels. He turned the mirror upward. His hands were shaking now. His throat was dry. He couldn't remember. The last time he blinked, mile 214 came again. This time, it was lying flat on the road, torn from the ground. As he passed over it, the car jolted like he'd run over something harder than metal. The lights behind him blinked out. He stopped the car. It was stupid. He knew that. But something. In him, maybe that leftover thing from his days in the army, maybe just plain old human curiosity made him step out. The night was hot and thick with crickets. The trees didn't rustle. The air didn't move. He walked back 10 paces, looking for the sign. Nothing. The road was bare. He turned and saw something sitting on his hood. At first, he thought it was an anemoral large raccoon, maybe, but it was wrong. Its limbs were too long, its face too narrow. And it was staring at him with glassy eyes that reflected no light. Its fingers were wrapped around the edge of the hood, like it was trying to decide whether to hold on or climb in. When he stepped back, it didn't flinch. It tilted its head slowly, like a dog hearing something strange. Then it smiled. Not with a mouth. With its eyes, Darren ran. He sprinted to the tree line, not because he thought it was safer, but because instinct screamed at him to get off the road. He ducked behind a cluster of pines and watched the thing slide down the hood and stand upright. It moved like it didn't have bones, just a fluid bag of skin and purpose. It walked up to the mile marker, which now stood upright again, like it had never been touched. It placed a hand on the numbers and turned to face the woods. It looked directly at Darren. He didn't remember how he got back in the car. He just knew he was driving again, faster now. 80, 90. The trees blurred past like streaks of black paint. No more signs. No more lights. just the thumping of his heart and the high whine of the engine. When he finally saw a gas station sign, he nearly wept. It was old, half-lit, and buzzing like a nest of hornets, but it was real. He pulled in, got out, and stumbled toward the convenience store like a drunk. The clerk behind the counter was watching a small TV. She looked up once, then went back to her screen. "You look like hell," she said. I need to ask you something," Darren panted. How far back was mile 214? She didn't answer. Right away. She muted the TV and leaned on the counter. "This is mile 227, hun," she said. 214's a good 13 miles south." He nodded, swallowed hard, and turned toward the drink cooler. "But you shouldn't have seen it," she added. "They tore that one out last spring. Some kid kept tagging it with weird symbols. County pulled the whole damn thing out." He turned back to her. "Then how?" The lights flickered overhead. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. She just said, "Some folks don't drive out of there. They get watched. Counted. Sometimes they don't even know they've stopped." Darren left the drinks and got in his car. He didn't take Highway 59 again. Ever. But some nights, when the road hums just right and the sky's too quiet, he still dreams of that stretch of asphalt. Still sees that sign in the distance. Still wakes up with the taste of wet rust in his mouth and his GPS blinking like it's counting something back to zero. It was just past 7:30 a.m. when they left Brenham. A 2-hour ride ahead of them to reach Giddings, where Rachel's aunt had her funeral scheduled. Owen was behind the wheel, Rachel riding shotgun, and her younger brother Micah curled in the back seat, half asleep with his headphones on. They weren't in a rush, but Owen, being a man who prided himself on shaving time from road trips like it was some sort of sport, decided to take a shortcut through the countryside once they cleared the edge of town. "I've got one that'll shave 15 minutes, he said, pointing at a gray squiggle on his phone's map. Farm to Market Road, 1213. No traffic. Just straight open road. Rachel frowned. "You sure?" That stretch between here and Giddings is mostly ranches and oil leases. Some of those FM roads don't even have signs. "I know what I'm doing," Owen muttered. They turned off onto the road at 7:52 a.m. It was marked only by a leaning, green sign with white stenciled letters that said FM 1213, though the bottom half had been shot out or rusted clean off. The asphalt was pale and crumbling, flanked by fields of tall yellow grass waving like wheat under a pale blue sky. The road twisted and narrowed, soon becoming little more than a blacktop track hemmed in by scrub and mesquite. After 20 minutes, Micah poked his head up and asked how much longer. Rachel looked at her watch and frowned. "It's only 8:07, she said. Owen gave her a sidelong look. "No way. We've been on this road at least 25-30 minutes. Feels longer." Rachel checked her phone. No signal. The time still. Read 8:07. Micah looked at the car clock. 8:07. They drove on. The morning sun never changed. It hung there, pale and immobile above the horizon, giving off light but no warmth. Shadows didn't stretch. They didn't shift. The trees along the road stood still even when wind moved the grass. "I think we passed that barn already," Rachel said. "No, that was a different one," Owen insisted. "It's got the same busted roof, the same wheelbarrow out front." Passed it again 15 minutes later. Then again, Micah started timing it on his phone. 15 minutes between each sighting. Every time, the same hawk circled above the barn. Every time. The same tumbleweed crossed the road and disintegrated just past the fence line. Rachel finally reached over and yanked the wheel. The car jolted as Owen fought it, but she screamed, "Stop the car, Owen! We need to get off this road." He slammed the brakes, gravel spitting from the shoulder. They sat there, engine idling, silence thick around them. "Let's just turn around. Watch." Micah whispered Owen through the car into reverse, backed up 50 yards, and spun it around. They drove back the way they'd come. But they passed the barn again, and again. It didn't matter which direction they drove. The barn came every 15 minutes. By now, the dashboard clock was blinking. The time stuck at 8:07. Micah's phone battery drained from 80% to 5 in under 10 minutes. And when he restarted it, the date read January 1st, 1970. Rachel started crying. She'd been quiet for the last hour, staring out the window like she was trying to will herself into the fields beyond the mesquites. She looked pale, her voice dry. "This place isn't real," she said softly. I don't know what it is, but it isn't real." Owen clenched the wheel so hard his knuckles were white. He said nothing. He was watching the road signs. They saw one sign, a yellow diamond. It said, "Merge ahead." Then another, a green mile marker. It read 12. Then 15 minutes later, the same merge ahead. Then the same mile marker. 12. Rachel checked her wristwatch again. The second hand was spinning backward. "I'm getting out," she said. "No," Owen snapped. "I need air. I can't breathe in here." She opened the door and stepped out. The moment she did, everything changed. The sound of the engine cut out. The sky turned the color of lead. The sun didn't fade, vanished. In its place was a cold, colorless sky. Micah screamed. Owen leaped out to grab Rachel, but she wasn't there. She had stepped out of the car, but she hadn't landed on the road. There were no footprints. Just a long smear in the dirt, as if something had dragged her into the grass. Rachel. Nothing. They searched for 30 minutes. The grass had gone dead still, standing straight and brittle like stalks of plastic. No birds. No wind. When they gave up and returned to the car, it had moved. It was now parked on the opposite side of the road. Engine off, lights dead, doors all shut. They had left it with the doors open. Micah refused to get back in. "I'm not going in there. It's wrong. That car isn't ours anymore." Owen didn't argue. They walked. They followed the road in silence. Every 15 minutes, the barn returned. Every 15 minutes, the same hawk circled at some point. They passed a dead deer in the middle of the road. It was fresh. Blood pooled out in a wide circle, neck twisted. They walked around it. 15 minutes later, the deer was there again. This time, its eyes moved. Owen whispered, "Did it just blink?" Micah broke into a run. The grass on either side started to hiss. Like wind in dry paper. They ran until their legs gave out. When they collapsed, it was in front of the barn. Same busted roof. Same wheelbarrow. Only this time, the barn door was open. Inside, something stood. It looked like a man, but stretched too tall. Shoulders hunched, arms too long, head cocked at a crooked angle. Its skin was gray and dry like burnt leather. Eyes too deep to see anything but shadow. It smiled. Owen grabbed Micah by the arm and pulled him up. But the boy's legs were buckling, his mouth working without sound. The thing in the barn took a step forward, then another with each step. The world dimmed. Owen dragged Micah behind him, back down the road. They didn't look back. Somewhere ahead, the car waited again. Only this time, the back seat was open, and something sat inside. It wore Rachel's clothes, but it wasn't her. Its smile stretched ear to ear, teeth thin and far too many. It lifted a hand and pointed at Micah. Micah collapsed to his knees. Owen screamed and ran, leaving the road, crashing into the brittle grass. Expecting it to cut his skin, but it crumbled beneath him like ashdot. He ran until the road vanished behind him, until the sky returned to blue, until his phone buzzed in his pocket. 9:31 a.m., he staggered out onto a highway shoulder, blinking against sudden sunlight. A sign read, "Welcome to Bastrop County." He was 30 miles east of where he should have been. He flagged down a trucker who asked what the hell had happened to him. Covered in dirt and bleeding from the knees, he told the cops everything. They found no Rachel, no Micah, no FM 1213, no. Barn. They checked satellite maps. Nothing there. The sign he swore they'd turned onto had never existed, but Owen kept his watch. It still spun. Backwards every morning at 8:07. The hill road past Medina wasn't on most GPS systems. Just a thin gray line on the old paper map Wade kept folded in his glove box, the one with the grease stains and torn corners. He'd taken it before, maybe once or twice, hauling livestock. From a ranch near Bandera down toward Uvalde. Saved him about 20 minutes, which mattered when you were on the clock and paid by the mile. But this time, he wasn't hauling anything. Just deadheading home with an empty trailer, radio low, and the rumble of thunder stalking the treetops behind him. It started with a wrong turn. That's what Wade told himself anyway. He'd blinked, rubbed the fatigue out of his eyes, and realized the road had forked without warning. The signs were gone. No paint on the asphalt. Just a split left climbing toward a tree-covered hill. Right sloping down toward what looked like a dry creek bed. He took the left. He didn't know why. It felt familiar, like an itch behind. The eyes? A pull. The sun had dipped behind the clouds a few minutes before. And now the sky wore that bruised purple shade that warned of storms that weren't done forming yet. The trees here leaned in close, branches like arms that had grown tired of reaching toward the light. The road wound upward, narrower now, no shoulder. Just broken guardrails and drop-offs that disappeared into tangles of mesquite and blackbrush. Then came the second curve. It didn't match. Wade knew this road, knew how it curved once, twice, then straightened out toward an old bridge near a crumbling barn. But this time, after the second curve, the road looped back sharp. Like a noose, tightening and dumped him facing north again. The sun was gone, not set just. Gone, the sky above was black, but not starless. Instead, it glowed faint red, like embers beneath thick ash. He slowed to a crawl. His dashboard clock blinked nonsense, 88 to 88. His radio clicked on. No sound, just the backlight flickering like a dying firefly. The steering wheel felt hot. His palms left prints in condensation. Wade tried to turn around, but the road behind him was gone. Not just missing Nit had changed. The trees were different. The drop-off now a steep rise. The road itself, narrower, cracked, older, like it had been forgotten decades ago. He muttered a curse and kept going. Gravel hissed under his tires. Like whispers, after a mile, he saw the fence. Barbed wire, tall, too tall. 5 lines instead of 3. Rusted and sagging, but new in some places. Shiny in others. Beyond it, just black fields and white rocks scattered like bones. A single sign hung askew from the gatepost. Nitrogen monoxide return. He kept going. Another curve, another wrong direction. The moon was up, now except it wasn't the moon. Too large, too red, like an eye half-lidded with sleep, or watching. Clouds drifted past it, but the light didn't change. It just glowed deeper. Wade adjusted his rearview mirror and saw the road behind him ripple. Not like heat, like movement. Like the road was. Folding, undoing itself. He gripped the wheel tighter and pressed the gas. The hill road buckled beneath him in places, little jumps, like his tires hit bones buried under the asphalt. Every few seconds, something flashed in the treetops. Not lightning. Cameras, maybe. Glints of glass. Eyes dot after the next turn, he passed a truck, just like his. Same model, same color. Same scratch on the fender. Empty, still idling. Door ajar. He didn't stop. The radio flared static first, then a voice. A child's voice, hoarse and low. Almost there. He shut it. Off. It came back on. Turn around, it said this time. Turn around before the road remembers who you were. He passed the same truck again. This time, there was someone inside. But the face didn't have eyes. Wade slammed the brakes. Gravel exploded beneath the tires. He opened the door to jump out, but the sky blinked. Just blinked like a strobe band. Suddenly, he was back in the driver's seat. Doors locked, engine humming. And the road ahead was paved now. Smooth, brand new. Clean white lines glowing without headlights. He didn't ask questions. He floored it. The speedometer climbed past 60. Then 80. The trees leaned back, the red moon now riding beside him like a second sun. His vision blurred, but not from speed. He blinked. His hands weren't on the wheel anymore. The truck was still moving. Dot in the passenger seat, someone sat now. A man, or maybe a thing shaped like a man, wearing a hat. Skin too pale, fingers too long. He didn't speak, but when Wade looked away, the thing leaned closer. The radio clicked back on. You took the second turn. Wade opened the door and jumped, or tried to. The door wouldn't open. The handle wasn't real anymore, just molded plastic. His legs wouldn't move. The pedals vanished. The road bent again. The same truck passed him. This time, he was inside it, but he was also still driving. The road twisted once more. He screamed. It didn't echo. The thing beside him whispered, "Now the road will drive you." And Wade felt the wheels keep spinning. But not under his feet, because the road had shifted again, behind him, and it never remembered where it started, only where it ended. He hadn't meant to drive out that far. Cal was just trying to take a quiet back route to Brownwood after a long shift down in Goldthwaite. The kind of oilfield graveyard work that leaves a man so tired he forgets what time it is, forgets even what day it might be. He had a habit of trusting old routes, roads he remembered from high school shortcuts that weren't on GPS but were etched into the part of the mind that runs on memory and gut instinct. That's what got him to the dairy in the first place. It used to be Sanderson's family dairy a half-century ago. The sign was still hanging, rusted out and hanging crooked over the skeletal remains of the entrance archway. Everyone local had a story about it, mostly dumb teen nonsense about dead cows and hauntings and kids daring each other to drive around the place at night. Cal remembered going there once on a dare when he was 16. Just one slow circle around the old access road that curved behind the milking sheds. And then out through the side road that spit you back toward Route 67. He remembered the road. More than the scare because it was smooth black asphalt. Newer than it should have been, strange compared to the cracked gravel lots surrounding it. That night, he hit the curve by the collapsed front gate without even thinking. There was something comforting about the idea of an empty loop to clear his head. No traffic, no headlights, just a lazy circle to breathe through the last 15 minutes of the drive home. The first loop was uneventful. Trees tangled above the asphalt in places, letting moonlight in only where the canopy broke. The dairy buildings looked worse than he remembered, caved in on the main barn. Shattered glass in the milking station windows, vines creeping in every direction like the place was slowly being swallowed. Still, peaceful in that haunted Texas way, with cicadas humming loud as lawnmowers, and the dry grass rustling like old paper. He came around the bend near the silos and glanced in his rearview mirror. That's when he saw the girl. She was sitting in the back seat, passenger side, her face turned toward the window like she didn't want to be seen. Pale hair, long and tangled, hanging over a denim jacket that looked old, worn in a way that didn't match the modern world. Cal blinked, looked again, empty. Just his own tired reflection and the back seat of his F-150, bare except for a blanket, and the empty coffee thermos from earlier. He exhaled, told himself he was hallucinating. Long shifts did that. He wasn't 20 anymore, and pushing 18 hours straight out in the heat will do a number on any man's head. Still, he took the loop again. Maybe part of him wanted to prove to himself there was nothing weird, just a trick of shadows and adrenaline. The second time around, the silence felt heavier. The cicadas were quieter. The wind had gone still. He drove slower, tires humming against the perfect asphalt, like they were being pulled along rather than rolling on their own. As he passed the collapsed loading dock, he flicked his eyes to the mirror again. There were two of them this time. The girl still looking away, and a boy now, maybe 10 or 11, in a striped shirt with sleeves too short. His face was turned toward Cal in the mirror. Not grinning, not angry, just watching. His mouth slightly open, his eyes wide and dark, reflecting the interior dome. Like Cal hadn't turned on, he'd jerked the wheel. The truck swerved toward the grass, tires skidding just a little before he corrected. Sweat sprang from his forehead, cold and fast. He pulled over and sat there, engine idling, breathing like he'd just run a mile. Again. The mirror showed nothing. His back seat was empty. His mind, clearly not. He could turn around. He should have. But the loop had a logic to it. Once you entered, the turn to Route 67 was on the other side of the dairy grounds, just past the line of silos. That's where the exit should be, the faster way home. He told himself to make the last turn, and then he could be done. Laugh about it later. Tell his brother about seeing ghost kids in the mirror like some truck stop crazy. Maybe even take a day off. Let the overtime rest for once. The third loop was different. The buildings were gone. Where the milking shed and feed storage had been, there was just open field. The moonlight touched smooth dirt like it had never been built on. It's Cal. Slowed, heart pounding harder now. Even the silos were missing. In their place was a long, narrow patch of land, burned black at the edges. Like something massive had sat there and been removed without explanation. He reached for the mirror again, hands trembling. For this time, the girl, the boy, a woman in a floral church dress that looked soaked in something darker than mud. She sat bolt upright, her hands folded in her lap, eyes closed. Next to her, an older man in overalls and a straw hat, his face nothing but a black smear where features should be. Not blurred, erased, as if whoever had been there didn't want to be remembered at all. Cal didn't look away. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the mirror even as his foot pressed harder on the gas. His heart beat faster. The curve of the road came again, and he didn't brake, just followed it. The way you do when something inside you has taken over. He didn't blink, just stared. And stared, he passed the entry gate again. He didn't remember turning. The truck rolled steady over the same stretch. Same field, same tangled trees. The buildings were back now, but wrong. They were whole. The dairy had been rebuilt. Not just repaired, new. Fresh red paint on the barn, white siding on the offices, lights on inside like work was still being done. He caught a flash of someone moving behind one of the windows, slow and shuffling. The road hadn't changed, but the world around it had. Cal gripped the wheel tighter, his knuckles pale in the dashboard light. He whispered something he didn't know what. Maybe a prayer. Maybe just his own name. The truck kept driving, the road bending in the same predictable circle. No exit in sight. In the mirror, the back seat was full. They were packed in tight. Now, a dozen maybe, shoulder to shoulder. A child with no mouth. A man whose jaw was hanging loose, flapping slightly with the movement of the truck. A girl with skin too tight across her face, like it had dried in the sun and was cracking down the middle. Eyes met his. None of them spoke. None of them moved. Then, one of them smiled. It was the boy from before. His teeth were small and too white. He lifted one hand and tapped the back of Cal's seat with 2 fingers. Cal felt the thump against the vinyl. Real, not imagined. He slammed the brakes. The truck skidded to a halt in the middle of the loop, gravel spitting out from the shoulder where the asphalt met the dry ground. He turned, fast, furious, terrified. The seat was empty again, but he was not alone. The window, beside him, fogged with breath, cold breath. From outside or inside, he couldn't tell. He locked the doors, though he wasn't sure what it would matter. He pulled a wide U-turn. Tires shrieking now, forcing the truck off the loop and into the weeds. The field was thick, brush and wild grass slapping the sides of the truck like angry hands. He pushed through, desperate for the highway. 4 lights, for noise. After what felt like 15 minutes, he broke through to a cracked old road, a different one than he'd entered on. Not the loop, not the smooth blacktop. This one was dry, dusty, and full of potholes. The dairy wasn't behind him anymore. Just an open field and a line of pine trees. His rearview mirror had fallen off. Dislodged somehow during the last hard turn, it lay in the passenger seat now, face down. He never put it back up. Cal made it to Brownwood around dawn, parked the truck, and walked home. Left the engine running until it choked out hours later. He didn't go to work the next day. Or the next, didn't take calls. Slept with the lights on. Burned sage his grandmother left him. Tossed out the rearview mirror and tore off the backseat cover. But some mornings, when the dew settles just right on his windshield, he sees shapes in the condensation. Faces, outlines, and sometimes he hears tapping just behind him. 2 quick knocks on the back of the seat. He hasn't driven past the dairy since, and no one he's talked to remembers the asphalt loop. Some say there's a dirt path there now. Others say there's nothing, just weeds and old fencing. But Cal knows it's still there, waiting. He first noticed it after Sweetwater. The clock on his dash said 6:42 when he passed the rusted green sign for the Hamlin exit. He wasn't heading to Hamlin. He was bound for Odessa, trying to make it in before nightfall. He had 4 hours. Left on the road, give or take, and the sun was already sliding down past the scrub hills in the rearview. There was a heaviness in the sky that looked like rain, but didn't smell like it. Just a kind of pressure, like the clouds were watching. 10 minutes later, the same sign showed up again. Same bullet holes in the metal. Same crooked post. Hamlin. 15 miles. The same clump of mesquites tangled behind it. His knuckles twitched on the wheel. He blinked a few times and chalked it up to a copycat sign. Maybe another entrance off a loop. Texas had plenty of that. Nothing to get worked up over. Then his gas dropped 2 notches. He'd filled up in Abilene. He should have had at least half a tank left, but the needle sank from just above 3/4 to almost a third, like something inside the tank had taken a big, greedy gulp. He leaned forward, tapped the glass once. Nothing changed. The radio fuzzed out. He reached for the knob, flipped through stations, got nothing but dead air until one. Channel clicked in, strong and clear. Some kind of talk show, but the voices were whispering, not just low whispering. Fast, breathy words layered over each other, like a dozen people speaking just behind a closed door. The sound gave him chills. He couldn't catch anything they were saying. There were no commercials, no station ID, nothing but the sound of whispers. He shut it off and drove in silence. The next sign said Hamlin, 15 miles. Again, he slowed a little, glancing around. No loops, no service roads. Just flat scrubland and fence lines stretching into the dusk. He tapped his phone to check the GPS. No signal, just a little spinning icon. He turned the screen off and looked back up. The sun was gone. It had been there moments ago, just above the trees. Now the whole stretch was bathed in that weird blue that only comes after the sun dips but before the night switches on. The kind of light that made everything look washed out and old. Shadows had no weight in it. They just leaked across the road like smoke. Up ahead, red taillights glowed. A pair of them, maybe 30 yards off. He eased up a bit to match their speed, glad not to be alone out there. The light swayed slightly, like the vehicle was floating. Not drifting, not weaving, just hovering in its lane, like it wasn't quite touching the road. He blinked and they were gone. No turn, no brake lights. Just vanished. The gas gauge dipped again, by the time he passed the Hamlin sign a fourth time. He was gripping the wheels so tight his fingers cramped. He flicked the headlights on, even though the sky still had some color. The beams didn't cut the gloom the way they should. It was like the light just stopped about 10 feet out, swallowed by the air. The whispering started again. No radio. On this time, just whispering, faint and steady, coming from somewhere in the car. He spun around in his seat, checked the back, nothing there. Checked the vents, nothing. But the whispering was louder now, like it was coming from the glove box or maybe under the seats. He turned the radio on and off a few times, just to drown it out. Didn't help. He opened the window for a breath of real air, but the wind didn't feel like wind. It felt still, dead. Warm like breath on the side of his face. He shut the window and locked the doors. No reason. Just instinct. And then Hamlin, 15 miles. His mouth went dry. He tried the brakes, then the wheel. The car responded fine, tires humming like always. He slowed to a crawl, pulled onto the shoulder. He stepped out, slammed the door, and stood. Beside the car, breathing heavy, fists clenched. The land around him was quiet. No crickets, no trucks in the distance. Just silence. Even the clouds looked like they were holding their breath. He walked around the car, kicked the tires. Nothing unusual. He popped the trunk, thinking maybe something had crawled in without him knowing, something alive. Something whispering, but it was empty, except for a red gas can and an old coat. He got back in. The whispers were gone. He drove another few miles, trying not to look at the fuel gauge. His stomach clenched when he passed a sign again. Hamlin, 15 miles, but this time was bent the other direction. The back of the sign that didn't make sense. He slammed the brakes, reversed down the shoulder until he came to the post. The sign still said Hamlin minus 15 miles, but it was facing the wrong direction, like someone had twisted it around. He checked the back. Blank metal, the way it should be. He looked up the road. Another set of taillights flickered on in the distance. He got in the car and floored it. As he gained speed, the whispers came back. Not just inside the car anymore. Outside too. All around him, he heard his name once, clear and slow. Just once. From the speakers, from the wind. From behind the back seat, he turned to look into the road, curved hard right. He swerved too late. Tires screamed. The car bounced off the shoulder and skidded down a shallow ditch, finally stopping sideways against a fence. The engine cut out. The clock still said 6:42. He tried the ignition. Dead. Tried again. Nothing. He sat in the car, panting, the whispers pressing close. He didn't dare look in the mirror. When he did, the back seat was empty. He climbed out and started walking. Each mile felt like chewing glass. No signs, no lights, no stars. Just that blue-gray air and the sound of something breathing beside him. Out of step with his own, he walked for what felt like an hour. Then headlights. A semi. He stumbled into the road, waving his arms. The truck hissed to a stop beside him, and the door swung open. "You okay, son?" came a voice from above. He looked up. The driver was older, with a ball cap and a thick mustache, and a face that looked familiar in a way he couldn't place. "I don't know," he said. "I think I've been driving in a loop." The driver nodded slowly. "You get on at Sweetwater?" He nodded. Double quotes, "Yeah," said the man. "That's how it starts." "What?" The man reached down and helped him up into the cab. "You're not the first," he said, "but you gotta stay awake now. That's the trick. They only get you if you fall asleep." "Who?" The driver didn't answer. The whispers started again. This time, they were coming from the CB radio, and one of the voices, one of them, was his own, laughing when he turned to look out the window. The Hamlin sign was right there again, 15 miles away, and the gas gauge in the truck started to drop. It was on the 3rd day of September that Mason Riley took the old county road north of Fredericksburg, the one that curved past the back acres of Blake Ranch and dipped down through the valley behind the abandoned grain silo. He wasn't supposed to be out there. Not really. The road was marked with a busted wooden sign that said, "Private property, no outlet." But it had faded in the summer sun, and the nail that held it up was so rusted it hung sideways like a broken neck. Mason saw it, slowed just enough to read it, then shrugged. He was 28, fresh off a contract job in Austin, still burning off the nervous buzz from too much black coffee and a long-winded client meeting. He wanted open air, something quiet and strange. That road had always been strange, and today it looked like it was asking to be driven. It started black, like most roads in hill country. Faded asphalt, some patches from old repair work, and a lot of loose gravel that popped up and pinged his undercarriage. Mason rolled down the window of his beat-up Tacoma, letting the hot wind pour in, carrying the scent of scorched earth and mesquite. To the left, a long cornfield stretched into the slope of the hills. To the right, scrub oak and cedar trees jutted up from a broken fence line, their twisted branches still thick despite the August drought. The air felt heavy, like a held breath, like the whole land was waiting for something. He wasn't more than half a mile in before he noticed the road had changed color. At first, he thought it was the light. The afternoon sun through the windshield sometimes did that. Warped colors tricked the eye, but this wasn't that. The pavement was red. Not the rust-colored dirt you find along ranch trails or iron-rich runoff from spring rains. This was brighter, almost brick red, as if someone had poured paint across the whole stretch of road and let it bake there until it soaked in. He slowed the truck and leaned forward. No tire marks, no footprints, no spray lines. Just red, clean, and even, and stretching ahead like a tongue. The truck trembled as he rolled onto it, but the tires held. The red pavement had a gritty texture, like something beneath the rubber didn't want him going fast. He eased up on the gas. The cornfield on the left was denser now, the stalks thick and tall, swaying slow and deliberate, even though there was no breeze. He could see the tassels moving, parting in waves like something was walking through it. Something bigger than a man. Mason gripped the wheel tighter and told himself it was just deer. Maybe wild pigs, but the rustle didn't sound like that. It was too steady, too slow. He reached a curve in the road and it looped back toward the hills. A T. The red gave way again, but this time it wasn't black. It was white, bright, almost blinding. Under the sun, the surface reflected light like polished concrete, but there were no seams. No division between one color and the next. One moment it was red, the next it was white, like he'd crossed some invisible threshold. Mason stopped the truck. Ahead, the road continued another quarter-mile, then vanished behind a stand of pecan trees that looked dead from the root up. The bark had peeled away in long ribbons, and the branches sagged low like they were too tired. To lift, the cornfield on the left was gone. In its place stood a flat expanse of open dirt, cracked and colorless. A scarecrow stood at the edge, limp and leaning, with a burlap sack for a face and arms stretched wide like it wanted to hug the sky. There were no birds. He checked his watch, said 2:47 p.m. He drove on. Heart thudding now, but he didn't. Want to admit why? He made the next curve, and the road came back around full circle. Or at least it should have. Instead, the cornfield was back but different. The stalks were burned, charred black and cut low, like they'd been torched from the inside. The sky had taken on a gray tint. Mason glanced at the horizon and realized the sun was gone. He pulled over. The clock still said 2:47. He got out, leaving the engine idling, and walked to the edge of the field. The ground was spongy beneath his boots, soft like moss but warm too. The touch, a sour chemical smell rose up from the soil. He turned in a circle, trying to get his bearings, but nothing looked right. The trees were farther away now, and there were no hills. Just corn. Just fire-blasted rows of it stretching into the haze. Behind him, the truck's engine sputtered once, then fell quiet. He turned. There was someone in the passenger seat. He hadn't seen anyone on the road. Hadn't picked up a hitchhiker. Hadn't stopped long enough for someone to crawl in. But the figure was there, tall, slumped forward, the shape of it like a man but wrong. Too long in the arms. Too narrow at the waist. Mason took one slow step back, then another. The figure didn't move. Just sat there, hunched, a burlap sack pulled tight over its head. The same as the scarecrow. He blinked and it was gone. The truck was empty. The engine off, the keys still in the ignition. He got back in and tried to start it. Nothing, just a click. No turn. He checked the watch again, 2:47. It didn't move. It wouldn't. Mason sat there for a full minute, gripping the wheel, sweat soaking through the back of his shirt, breath held in his throat like a stone. Then he turned the key again. The engine roared. The road ahead looked different, no black again, like before. Normal. The sky had brightened. The cornfields were green and full. The scarecrow was gone. He drove. He passed the red pavement again, then the white, then the charred. Corn, his watch, still said 2:47. It was always 2:47, and each time the road looped back. Something new waited in the cornfield. A woman crying. A child, standing motionless with blood on its chest. A man without a face. He tried to talk to them, tried to yell out the window. No one ever moved. They just stood there, staring, silent. And with each loop, the field grew closer to the road. The stalks leaned in. The dirt swallowed more of the shoulder. The trees vanished entirely. By the fifth loop, Mason stopped calling it Fredericksburg. It wasn't anymore by the seventh. He stopped speaking at all. Somewhere past the 10th loop, the road stopped changing color. It was white now, all the way through. White and endless. White and silent. His truck never ran out of gas. The radio only played static, and the sun never moved. He knew the faces in the field by then. He knew their postures, their clothing, the shape of their hands, and when he saw himself among them, sweating. Mouth open mid-scream, one hand lifted as if knocking on invisible glass, he didn't stop. He just kept driving. It was just past 3 a.m. when Manny Ortega first saw the car. He was sipping the last of a warm Dr. Pepper and thinking about quitting early when the CB crackled. Nothing clear, just static, maybe a clipped word, but enough to raise the hair on his arms. He leaned forward in his chair, the hum of the surveillance monitors throbbing low under the desert silence. That part of Route 205, way out past Marfa and hugging the Texas-Mexico line like a rusted zipper, rarely showed anything but coyotes and lost tourists. Most nights, it was dead quiet. But that night, the loop feed from camera 12 started acting. Strange at first, it looked like the same stretch of scrub and sand and distant border fence. But then the frame jumped like the same image was repeating, but not quite. The angle hadn't changed, but the shadows were wrong. A sliver of movement crept across the bottom. Manny squinted and rewound the feed. That's when he saw it off. Pair of headlights, just barely there, ghosting across the desert floor, circling wide around something. A rock. No, it was a cactus. Just one, spindly and gnarled, standing alone in the middle of the barren stretch. He zoomed in, checked the coordinates, and frowned. That section of dirt was off the main road. Maybe part of the old service route that used to run supply convoys during the 60s. Long since shut down. And yet, here it was, clear as day, a lone car, looping around a single cactus again and again. Headlights never wavered. No brake lights, no turn signals. Just a steady, slow crawl. He radioed dispatch, got a hesitant go-ahead, and climbed into the Jeep. The desert at night was another world. Blacker than most people imagined. The stars hung low, thick and raw, and the wind never stopped whispering through the brush. He followed the old coordinates, driving without music. The tires crunching sand and gravel under a sky that felt too still. It took him 30 minutes to find the road. More like a rut, really barely more than a scar on the landscape, but it was there. He drove slow, real slow. His headlights caught the glint of something ahead. Glass? The car was still moving. A pale silver Chevy Impala, the kind you'd expect to see parked outside a church or a discount motel. It moved in a wide circle, maybe 40 feet across, like it was tethered to an invisible axis. At the center was the cactus, tall, thorny, and wrong. Not just wrong in shape, twisted in a way no plant should grow, but wrong in presence. Manny couldn't explain it, but he felt it in his chest the second he got out. The air was heavy, not hot, but dense, like breathing underwater. He held his flashlight steady and stepped forward. The car's windows were rolled up, but he saw no one inside, just the glint of leather seats, a swinging air freshener on the mirror, and a slow turn of the steering wheel, moving on its own. He waved, called out, nothing. The car didn't react, didn't slow, it just kept turning around. And around his boots crunched over dry earth as he approached. Dust clung to his boots like oil. He reached the edge of the loop and stopped. Something told him not to cross. Some low voice deep in his gut that whispered in his father's tone. He raised the flashlight and swept it around. The cactus stood about 6 feet tall, and its limbs bent not upward, but out and down, like arms frozen mid-grab. The ground beneath it wasn't just barren. It was scorched, blackened in a perfect circle, like something had been burning from below for years. The car rolled past him again, same pace, same arc. He circled around to the driver's side, heart thudding in a way that felt too slow, like it didn't trust. The moment either, then he saw the license plate Texas tags, worn and half dust covered. The sticker expired 3 years ago. He knocked on the window. Nothing. He shined his light and still no driver. Just then, the car stopped. Not jerked. Stopped, like it had decided it was done. Manny's stomach turned to ice. He stepped back without realizing it. The headlights were on him now, bright and still. He walked to the door and pulled the handle. Unlocked. The door creaked open and the dome light flickered. He leaned in. The front seat was empty. So was the back, no keys in the ignition. The car was cold. Not just unused cold, but unnatural cold. Like the air inside had come from somewhere much deeper than the desert night. His breath fogged. He looked back toward the cactus. It hadn't moved, but it felt closer. He shook the thought off and stepped away. Then the radio in his Jeep cracked. Ortega, static. Ortega, what's your 20? He grabbed his shoulder mic. I'm at the site. Car's here, no driver. Something's off. More static. Then a whisper. Manny? He froze. That wasn't dispatch. It wasn't even on the right channel. The whisper came again, this time from the car. He turned. The Impala's headlights flared, and the engine turned over by itself. He backed up, hand on his holster. The car moved again. Up. This time, it wasn't. Circling, it was coming for him. He ran to the Jeep and slammed the door shut just as the Impala swerved. Missed him by inches and started another wide loop only. Now it wasn't around the cactus, it was around him. His headlights flickered. The dash glitched. His GPS spun in place, coordinates zeroing out. He turned the ignition dead. He tried again, nothing. The Impala looped again. Faster, the dome light inside it flickered. Like a heartbeat, and the cactus. It was closer now. Somehow, he didn't see. It moved, didn't hear it, but there it was, about 10 feet from the Jeep. Its spines bent slightly inward. Shadows stretched too long across the dirt. Manny gripped the steering wheel. Whispered a prayer in broken Spanish. He tried the ignition again. The Jeep roared to life. He didn't wait. He threw it into reverse, spun the wheel, and tore out of the loop. The tires screamed over the dirt. The Impala tried to follow, but stopped halfway. Its headlights dimmed, then cut out. The desert swallowed the silence again. He didn't stop driving until he hit the checkpoint miles north. When he finally told the story, the supervisors wrote it up as heat exhaustion, desert confusion, maybe drugs. He took the leave they gave. Him drank too much for a month and quit the job by year's end. But that patch of desert is still there, and every so often a new report comes through. A spinning car, a cactus that casts no shadow. A stretch of road not on any map, with no mile markers, no fences, no footprints leading in or out. Just that Impala, still looping, still looking. And sometimes, they say, there's someone in the passenger seat, face pressed to the glass, smiling. The morning had been clear when Darren left the little town of Daonas. Just a blink and you'll miss it kind of place off Highway 90. He'd been driving since sunrise. Heading west toward Del Rio, hoping to make it by mid-afternoon before the worst of the heat kicked in. His old Tacoma wheezed a little when he accelerated, but it ran, and that was enough. The land out here was flat and dry, scattered with mesquite brush and the occasional low fence marking someone's long-forgotten property line. There weren't many people out this way anymore, not since the floodplain dried up and the farms failed, nothing left but dirt and ghosts. He passed an old marker sign, covered in rust, that read CR 1263, and didn't think much of it at first. Just another cracked stretch of county road veering off the main highway, the kind locals used to take to get around traffic that didn't exist anymore. He wasn't in a rush, and the idea of a shortcut through the back roads felt right. He made the turn. The pavement changed immediately. It was older, cracked through like dry skin on a corpse, white chalk lines almost completely erased by time. Tufts of yellow grass pushed up through the center divider. and the trees twisted, black-barked mesquites leaned in closer than they had on the highway. He turned the radio down when it started to hiss and crackle, thinking maybe the signal was just bad out here. The silence that followed filled the truck cab like cotton stuffed in his ears. 10 minutes in, the fog rolled in without warning. Not mist, not haze. Fog, dense, low crawling fog. The kind you'd expect to see coming off a lake at dawn, not in the middle of West Texas at noon. 1 second the sun was hot on his arms through the window, and the next, everything beyond the windshield blurred into a thick wall of gray. He slowed down, flicked on his headlights, then his hazards gripping the wheel tighter as his gut went tight. He didn't like this. He didn't like how sudden it was. The air inside the cab turned cold. He kept driving, figuring it would clear up. Texas fogs don't last long. It didn't clear. Instead, the farther he drove, the thicker it got. Trees started to vanish into the whiteness, swallowed whole like they'd never been there. He felt the tires bump along the shoulder and realized the road was warping beneath him. He straightened out and pushed forward, trying not to panic. That's when he saw the figure. Just a shape at first, vague human height, off to the side of the road, barely distinguishable in the fog. He slowed, thinking maybe someone had broken down or needed help. But when he passed it, it didn't move. No wave, no acknowledgement. Just stood there, turned slightly toward the road. Head tilted too far to one side, like it was listening. He kept going. A minute later, another figure. This one standing on the other side of the road, same height, same tilt of the head. He picked up speed, ignoring how the fog was now sneaking in through the air vents. How the cold in the truck had started to bite into his skin. Another figure. And another. They started appearing more often, closer to the road, always just barely visible until they were nearly past. Darren's hands were slick on the steering wheel, and his heart kicked faster every time another one emerged from the gray. He started counting them, at first out of habit, then as a way to stay sane. 7, 8, 9, each one closer than the last. The 10th stood right on the center line. Darren swerved to avoid it and nearly drove into the ditch. The fog thinned for a second, just long enough for him to catch a glimpse of its face. Or lack of one. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just smooth skin stretched tight over a skull, like a wax figure left out in the heat too long. But it moved its head to follow him as he passed. And he saw its fingers twitch. He didn't count after that. The road twisted when it should have been straight. He swore the turns weren't there when he started, and when he glanced in the rearview mirror, he saw one of them walking behind his truck, then another. They were following. The radio popped to life with a high-pitched whine. Then static. Then a voice garbled and slow, like someone underwater. Keep ... driving ... Darren slammed the power button, heart hammering. The fog outside turned gray-black, swallowing the sun entirely. His headlights barely pierced it anymore. The asphalt cracked beneath his tires, the lines vanishing completely. He couldn't tell if he was even on the road anymore. The next figure stood in the middle of the lane again. He didn't swerve this time. His bumper passed through it. Or he thought it did. But the truck jerked as if he'd hit something heavy, and his head slammed into the steering wheel. He groaned, dazed, then looked up. The figure was gone. He checked the rear view again. Nothing. But the fog behind him wasn't just fog anymore. It was darker now, moving like smoke, curling and twisting, almost alive. And within it, shapes flickered closer. He pressed the gas. The engine whined, struggling. The Tacoma wasn't built for speed, but he pushed it anyway. The fog in front of him shimmered, revealing glimpses of the cracked road, of barbed wire fences twisted like they'd been yanked out of the ground, of broken mailboxes hanging open like screaming mouths. The GPS flicked on by itself. No signal. No map. Just a red dot and text beneath it that read, "You are here. Then you never left." Darren slammed the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop. He threw it into reverse, spun it around, and gunned it back the way he came. He didn't care if he was going in circles now. He'd rather die moving than stay still and wait for whatever was out there to catch him. He passed the same bent road. Sign, CR 1263. Again. The fog never lifted, and every time he checked the mirror, something was sitting in the back seat. It didn't appear all at once. The first time, just a shadow. Then a hand on the headrest. Then the faint outline of a face pressed against the window by the fifth loop. 'Twas fully visible. One of the faceless ones. But now it had his face. Mouth grinning too wide, skin stretched. Tight like plastic, wearing his own features like a mask. Darren screamed and swerved, but the thing didn't move. Just stared at him with his own dead eyes. The GPS blinked again. Almost here. Then the radio came back on, his own voice, whispering. Repeating one sentence again and again. You brought the fog. He stopped the truck one last time. Got out. The air outside smelled like sulfur and rotting meat. The fog clung to him, thick as wet wool. The figure stepped closer now, no longer content to watch. One touched his arm. It was cold. Then it burned, and the world around him changed. The fog cleared for a second, and Darren stood in the middle of a two-lane stretch of road. No truck, no radio. No movement. He was the one standing now. Head tilted, waiting. The fog rolled in again. The road behind the cemetery in Laredo was paved smooth but pale, like bone. Most people didn't know it was there unless they got turned around off Highway 359, took the wrong service road past the feed store, and slipped behind the last row of crumbling graves without meaning to. There were no signs, no lights, and no fences. Just an open turn that dipped behind a thick wall of mesquite and silence. Local maps never showed it, and GPS would either stall or offer coordinates that led to blank spots. That was part of the reason folks around Laredo whispered about it the way they'd whisper about a relative who drank too much or saw ghosts real soft and never after sundown. Gil Torres found it on a Thursday in August, hot enough to blister paint off a bumper. He'd been driving back from San Ignacio after a job interview that didn't go anywhere. A favor from a cousin who hadn't meant it. He'd missed lunch, hadn't slept much, and was down to half a tank in a pickup that didn't hold alignment or air conditioning well. He had the window rolled down, one arm out, dust caked along his elbow. When he saw the small turn near the edge of the fence line and thought maybe it was a shortcut, the curve swept gently to the right, dipping behind the cemetery like a dirt road hiding from memory. Gil slowed, then turned. A red-tailed hawk sat on a telephone wire, watching him, still as rust. The first time around the loop, he thought it was just a narrow bypass. On one side, tall grass stretched to the edge of the cemetery's backside. On the other, a small ravine, rolled down into thorny brush and black willows, the kind that only grew near standing water. The sky was that dusty pink color the sun turns when it's been burning too long. About halfway through, he saw the headstones. They were older here, rough-cut slabs with names carved by hand, crooked and worn thin. The stones looked forgotten, the grass growing too high around them. He spotted one that had toppled sideways, half swallowed by weeds. Then he saw it. It was near the end of the curve, a simple granite marker set straight in the dirt, with his name carved into it. Gilberto Torres, nothing more. No dates, no beloved son, no symbols or flowers. He slowed to a crawl, heart suddenly crawling up into his throat. He got out, walked closer, and knelt. His fingers brushed the lettering. The stone was cold, like it had been sitting in the shade all day, though the sun was hot and bare overhead. He blinked then, a horn blasted from behind. Gil turned, startled, and saw an old flatbed coming around the bend. It didn't slow. He jumped back just in time, his boots sliding in the grass. And the truck passed without a glance, driver's face shadowed under a cap. Dust curled up in its wake, thick and gray, and when it cleared, the road beyond was empty again. Gil walked back to the truck, shaken, and decided he must have read it wrong. The name, the stone it, had to be coincidence. Some other Torres. Some other Gilberto. He drove back toward the exit. But the exit didn't come. The road curled again, the same gentle bend behind the trees, past the same patch of yellow grass, past the same grave with the fallen stone, and there was the marker again. This time, it had a date. Born 1983. Died. The space after was blank, but shallowly etched, like it was waiting for someone to come back and finish it. He hit the gas. The pickup jerked forward, bouncing over a pothole he didn't remember from the first loop. The trees leaned in closer. The brush was thicker, the light fading too fast for the hour. He passed a small sign nailed to a fence post. It hadn't been there before. Keep circling. Gil's mouth went dry. He tried his phone, but it blinked red. Nitrogen monoxide service. The compass spun in slow, jerking circles. A third loop. Now there were more markers. Not just his, but new ones. Uncarved. They were spaced out evenly along the side of the road. Still granite, still fresh. One of them had Torres already on it. Then came the sound. It started like wind. But rose and broke into a soft whispering, like someone reading names in reverse, not speaking chanting. He couldn't catch a single word. Every time he strained to hear, the whispering slipped behind his thoughts. Gil kept driving. The sun hadn't moved. The sky remained stuck in that same sunset, like a looped photograph. He passed a red piece of cloth nailed to a post, blowing in wind he couldn't feel. He went around again and again. After the 6th or 7th loop, he tried to reverse. Threw the truck into gear, turned it hard. The engine died, dead quiet. He turned the key, but the starter clicked like bones rattling in a box. The whispering got louder. Gil opened the door and stepped out. The headstone now said, "Died August 3rd, 2025. That was today. He stumbled backward. The dust was gone. The wind was gone. The trees didn't move. The sky now looked like dry paint. He started walking. No matter where he stepped, the grass made no sound. His shadow didn't follow right. Sometimes it lagged. Sometimes it moved ahead. Behind him, the pickup had vanished. In its place stood a stone cross, cracked and weathered, with initials carved too deep. They weren't his, but they felt familiar. He ran. He kept running. But the road always bent back the same way. He came back around, panting, sweat soaking through his shirt, only to find his own footsteps in the dirt. Then something changed. The cemetery looked newer. The grass was cut, the headstones straighter. There were flowers, fresh ones, plastic ones too. Solar lamps blinked near some plots, and people were there. Real people. A woman in a long dress. A boy with a balloon. A man in a sheriff's hat, Gil. Stepped toward them, relief bubbling in his throat. But they didn't move. As he got closer, he saw they were statues. Made of something soft but stiff. Wax, maybe. Or bone. Their eyes were too wet. Their mouths too open. He stepped back, and his own voice whispered from the wind. Clear now. Don't stop driving. Gil turned and ran back toward the road, found the curve again, and followed it. Another loop, the headstone now read, "Buried with no funeral." The stone next to it had his mother's name. He fell to his knees. The whispering came louder again, now layered with other sounds. An old song he half remembered from childhood. Tires screeching. The beep of a hospital machine. His father yelling in the rain. All of it woven into one voice that sounded like memory trying to bury itself. He screamed, and the sound vanished into the sky like smoke. Then headlights from behind. A car. Slow, no driver. It rolled up next to him and stopped. The passenger door opened. He got in. He didn't remember deciding to. The car drove. Itself, he looked in the rearview mirror and saw nothing. No road, no trees. Just fog. Then the whisper came again. "Closer now, you'll know the loop's over." When you don't see your own name, Gil closed his eyes. The road bent again. He didn't scream anymore, because the last time he passed the marker, the date was complete, and the stone smiled. The road out by Devil's Backbone wasn't on any recent maps. Locals called it the Forgotten Spur, though nobody could agree when it was last used or where it actually went. Some said it was built during the Depression to carry limestone trucks from the quarry up to Blanco. Others insisted it was a military route that had been quietly decommissioned after the war. Whatever its purpose, the thing about that road was this: once you turned onto it, you always saw him. Martin Cross didn't believe any of that, not at first. He was 49, recently divorced, the kind of man who still ironed his jeans and used paper maps, the kind who needed to drive after dark just to keep himself from drinking. His job in San Marcos didn't bring him much joy anymore, and most nights, instead of going home, he'd head north along the backbone, letting the twists and dips of the hill country lull him into something close to peace. He first took the Forgotten Spur on a Wednesday evening in October. The sun had dipped low, staining the sky that deep, muddy orange you only see in Texas, and there was that peculiar hush in the air, like the world was holding its breath. He saw the Sina, crooked, rusted thing half covered in mesquite. Figured he'd take it, just for the hell of it. The paved road gave way to cracked blacktop, then to faded gravel, winding through cedar scrub and open pasture land. That's when he saw the hitchhiker. A tall man in a faded jacket stood by the side of the road. One thumb out, head slightly tilted. Nothing unusual about that, not at first glance. Martin passed him without slowing down, just caught a glimpse. In the rearview mirror, the man didn't turn to watch the car go. Just stood there, motionless. That might have been it. If not for what happened 10 minutes later, Martin was looping back south. Or at least he thought he was when he saw him again. Same spot, same man, or almost the same. The hitchhiker's face looked older this time, more drawn, like a week had passed since the first sighting instead of minutes. His jacket had a tear at the collar that hadn't been there before. Martin blinked, looked at the map, and saw only blank space where the spur should have been. He drove on an hour past. Then, too, the needle on the gas gauge dipped lower, but the terrain didn't change. No houses, no turnoffs. And then there he was again. This time, Martin slowed. The hitchhiker turned his head slightly, just enough to reveal sunken cheeks and pale sunburned skin, and eyes that didn't seem quite right. They weren't human eyes anymore. They looked ... glassy, like something behind them had gone still. Like what you see staring back at you in the eyes of a taxidermy deer. Martin rolled the window down just a crack. "You all right, friend?" He called. The hitchhiker didn't speak, just nodded, but in that nod was something ... off. It didn't match the rhythm of a man. It was too slow, too delayed. Like it took time to register the question. Martin drove on by the fifth loop. He stopped pretending he was heading anywhere. The forgotten spur had no end. The landscape rearranged itself like a dream. Same clusters of oak trees, same rocky embankment where the soil turned red, same weathered sign nailed to a crooked post. He even began to recognize patterns in the way the shadows fell across the road, and the hitchhiker was always there. Hush, pass. His face decayed further. First, his lips turned gray, then cracked. His eyes lost color. His skin sagged in places, like old wax left in the sun. But the worst part, the part that sent ice prickling down Martin's spine, was that with every pass, the hitchhiker looked more like him. Not in a metaphorical way. Literally, the man's jawline, his thinning hair. Even the slight scar on the right side of his cheek from a dog bite Martin had gotten as a kid, they were there, changing gradually, like a face being sculpted in slow motion. By the seventh pass, Martin couldn't tell who was watching whom. He'd stopped checking the mirror by then. He tried turning around, pulling U-turns, even reversing a quarter mile. At one point, but every attempt led him right back to that same curve, where the hitchhiker stood waiting, each time closer to the shoulder. Martin shouted at him, screamed once. The man didn't flinch, didn't blink. Just raised that dead, familiar face and stared. That night never ended. The moon never rose. The gas gauge stayed just above E. Martin's watch, stopped at 9:06 p.m., and never ticked forward. At some point, he stopped feeling tired or hungry. His phone lost service within minutes of entering the spur, and the radio played only static, broken now and then by a voice that sounded like his own, but wasn't saying anything intelligible, just a low murmur, like someone praying in reverse. He did the only thing left to do. He stopped the car. Stepping out, the air was dry and strangely warm, with a kind of silence that felt pressurized. The hitchhiker didn't move. Martin walked toward him, keeping his hands visible like the man was some kind of wild animal that might bolt or charge. Up close, there was no mistaking it. The hitchhiker had his face. Not just a similar one, not just familiar. His face, the same skin tone, the same deep crease between the eyebrows, the same eyes, though these were hollow now, rimmed with shadow and something like frost. Martin reached out, but before his fingers touched that pale skin, the man vanished. Not disappeared, he simply wasn't there anymore. Like a skipped frame in an old tape, Martin turned back to the car. The driver's seat was no longer empty. Someone was in it. He ran, not toward the car, but down the road, into the trees, branches scratching at his arms and neck, the gravel slipping beneath his boots. But the trees didn't deepen. The woods didn't thicken. It was like running on a treadmill while the scenery looped behind him. When he stopped, gasping, the road was there again. The car was parked the same way. The hitchhiker was back, and this time he smiled. That smile broke something inside Martin. Not just fear, but a fracture deeper than emotion. A realization. The road wasn't looping. He was. Each pass, a little more of him stayed behind. Each time he looked in the mirror, the reflection seemed less sharp, like a copy of a copy. And the man by the road seemed more real, more permanent. He tried to leave once more. Closed his eyes, put the car in drive, floored the gas pedal, didn't stop for anything. When he opened his eyes, the hitchhiker was standing in the road ahead, both hands raised. Martin swerved, clipped the ditch, flipped once, twice. When he came to, there was no wreck, no blood. Just him, standing by the side of the road, and headlights approaching. It was an old sedan, dark blue, the kind his father used to drive. As it passed, Martin saw the driver's face lit for a moment, confused, frightened, starting to realize the loop. He raised his hand, thumb out, head tilted, and he smiled. The first time Ethan drove the loop, he didn't notice anything strange. He'd been out by Caddo Lake fishing with his buddy Bryce, but they'd split up after a stupid argument over a cooler full of beer. Ethan was already halfway to pissed, and Bryce had told him to take his attitude and go sleep it off under the pines. So he did, but when he couldn't sleep and the buzzing of the mosquitoes grew louder than the water lapping the boat dock, he got in his truck and decided to drive. Clear his head, find a place with a gas station and maybe some food. Something with flickering fluorescent lights and a microwave burrito. He remembered a small service road near the state park boundary, a winding trail that looped back toward the marshy edge of the lake before heading into the woods. He figured he'd take that shortcut and hit Highway 43 before swinging back around to Jefferson. The loop was narrow, uneven, and poorly marked, but it was familiar in a way all old Texas roads are if you've grown up with too many gravel driveways and not enough sidewalks. His headlights caught the tall pines flanking either side, branches hanging low like arms crossed in warning. At first, he didn't think much of the smoke. Just some brush burning nearby. Cato's locals still did that. Burned trash, cleared old stumps. Sometimes even left a fire smoldering overnight like the woods were some open-air fireplace no one cared about. But this smell was different. Acrid, like burning plastic or melted tar. Faint at first, then thicker, the deeper he went. He rolled down his window, and the smell rushed in like it had been waiting. It didn't sting so much as settle, coated his throat. He coughed and rolled the window back up. Looked for a place to turn around. The loop wasn't long. It should have brought him back out toward the main road by now. But after 20 minutes, the turns kept coming and the woods kept thickening. The second time he took the curve near the broken oak stump, he recognized it. The jagged trunk angled like a shattered wrist. He'd passed that already. A bad feeling crept up the back of his neck. He turned off the music, leaned forward, and squinted into the growing red haze. The sky looked weird like sunset caught in a dirty mirror. No stars, no moon, no direction. He checked the time. 2:43 a.m., same as when he left the dock. Ethan kept driving. The next landmark came into view, the rusted metal signpost with no text, just bolts where something used to be. Then the burned-out shell of an old sedan off to the left, half covered in vines and soot-blackened, that hadn't been there before. He slowed the truck, craned his neck to look, and saw the windshield was gone. So were the front seats. The metal warped like it had melted in place. But the glass on the ground hadn't shattered it. Looked like it had sunk into the dirt. Like the car had been there a long time. He got out. Not because it was smart, just because that's what guys like Ethan did. They got close to the thing that felt wrong because they didn't trust their gut unless it punched them in the teeth. He walked up to the wreck. The smell of burning was stronger here. It's not smoke anymore, something chemical, rancid, like roasted meat and rubber. He gagged and backed away. That's when he noticed the trees. They were black, not from shadow, but from soot. Burn marks climbing. The trunks, like the whole forest, had caught fire and frozen mid-blaze. Yet there was no ash on the ground, no embers. Just that smell and the feeling that someone was watching. He ran back to the truck and drove faster. Turned around at the clearing and headed the way he came. But after 3 turns, he was right back by the wrecked sedan. Only now, the metal looked fresher, not as caved in. And there were footprints in the dirt but doubled. Like he'd walked this same path twice. The clock still read 2:43 a.m. The third loop was worse. The sky bled into deeper shades of red, not the warm kind either, not sunset or autumn. Blood red, viscous and thick, like the sky was clotting. The trees had gone black all the way up, and now some of the branches were stripped bare, gnarled like skeletal fingers. The burning smell was unbearable, but Ethan kept the windows shut and drove on. He kept telling himself he'd break the loop, that there had to be a cut-through or a shoulder he'd missed. But everything was familiar now. Every dip in the road, every crack, every leaning tree. Even the road signs were blank, not old or rusted blank, as if nothing had ever been written on them. When he saw the figure for the first time, he slammed the brakes. A man standing in the road, right in the middle of the loop, near the same oak stump. Ethan hit the horn. The man didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, arms at his sides. He wore jeans and a white t-shirt soaked through like he'd been swimming in gasoline. His hair was short, black, plastered to his head. Face hard to see, smeared, wrong, like the air shimmered around it. Ethan blinked and the man was gone. No sound, no footsteps, just gone. He didn't stop again. Didn't even slow when the car appeared a second time, this time burning, flames licking silently around it without smoke. The wreck lit up like a warning flare, but no heat came off it. Just light and that smell now crawling through the vents and under the floor mats. He passed a deer on the fourth loop, only it wasn't running, just standing at the edge of the road with eyes too wide, and a rack of antlers bent backward like they'd grown the wrong way. It blinked at him, or it tried to, but the lids didn't close. The eyes stayed open, glossy and cracked like glass marbles. Ethan screamed. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something primal, something that told him this place wasn't just broken. It was feeding. The sun never came. The sky never brightened. No matter how many loops he drove, the clock never moved. Every now and then the truck sputtered. The gas needle twitched, but it never dropped. The road stretched, but never changed. The signs remained blank. The trees blackened deeper, and the figure in the road got closer. By the seventh loop, the man stood on the shoulder. By the ninth, he was in the passenger seat. Ethan didn't know how. He hadn't opened the door, hadn't stopped driving, but there he was, wet shirt, black hair, a smell of burning flesh that made Ethan's eyes water. He didn't speak, just sat there, face still unreadable, eyes fixed on Ethan like he was the one being driven. Ethan tried to scream again, but his throat locked. He stopped the truck. Right there in the middle of the loop, no point anymore. The man turned his head. His face shifted, not changed, shifted, like it slid under the skin. First Bryce, then his father, then someone Ethan didn't recognize but felt in his bones. Then himself, older, gaunt, burned. Then the face stopped shifting. It settled into a version of Ethan that had been cooked from the inside out. The man finally spoke. "You should have turned back." And then he got out and walked into the woods. Ethan stayed there for hours, or minutes, or days. He didn't know. The clock still read 2:43. The sun still refused to rise. When he finally drove again, the road felt shorter. The trees pressed in tighter. The loops came quicker now. No brakes, no variation. Just the smell of burning, the wreck, the deer, the signs. Sometimes he heard whispers in the vents. Sometimes. The face in the rear view wasn't his dot. Ethan never made it out of the loop. He's still driving, if you believe the stories. The truck still circles. The lights are always on. The gas never runs dry. Some nights, campers by the lake say they hear an engine in the distance, but it never gets closer, just circles. They say if you smell burning near Caddo Lake, when the sky turns red. Don't go looking. Don't take the loop. Don't chase the sound of tires on gravel. Don't try to find the road, because once you do, you'll see the same trees, the same sky, and maybe, just maybe, yourself, sitting in the passenger seat, waiting to take over the next loop. The road out past Terlingua isn't on any official map. Not even those local tourist prints they hand out at the gas stations with the fake ghost sightings and chili cook-off routes. This one, locals just call it the final miles barely. More than cracked tar curling through desert scrub and mesquite, stretching out beyond the last hint of cell service, past the sulfur air and forgotten RV carcasses, and into the nothing. No name, no markers. Just one sun-bleached cattle guard and an old hand-painted sign hanging crooked off a fence post. Private property. That's the first and last warning. Josh didn't believe in stories. He'd grown up in Fort Worth, worked a mechanic job up near San Angelo, and only ever drove south when he wanted space to drink in peace or shoot into the dark without cops showing up. He'd heard the tales from the old-timers at the cafe, their mouths stained with tobacco and their eyes glassy with heat and age. They talked about the final mile like it was a dare, one of those hometown rituals teenagers used to scare each other with before phones made all the world too bright. He wasn't some kid looking for thrills. He was just bored, hungover, and tired of the kind of women who smiled too big and lied too easy. The first time he drove it, nothing happened. That's what he told himself. Was dusk, his old Bronco rumbling steady under him, and the desert was that soft blue that came just before full dark. He passed a dead coyote on the shoulder and a mailbox so rusted it had folded in on itself. 1 mile, a simple loop. Dirt kicked up behind his tires. The road dipped just once before curling him back to the entrance near the cattle guard. He thought it was just a trick of the terrain, how some ranch roads in Texas looped back without you noticing. Nothing unusual, but the second time he noticed the fence on the left side had fewer posts than before. The barbed wire hung lower, swaying slightly, though there wasn't any wind. He turned down the radio just to hear the sound of his tires crunching the grit. The desert had gone too quiet. Even for this part of Brewster County, there should have been something, a cricket, the buzz of heat in the air. But there was nothing but the occasional groan of his shocks as the Bronco dipped again into that same shallow curve. On the third loop, something white moved between the mesquites. He braked, hard heart thumping too fast for how little he'd seen. It was just a flash, a figure maybe, off to the left, no more than a glimpse between thorned branches. Tall, pale. Still, he stared out at the desert until his eyes watered, then cursed under his breath and shifted into drive. He finished the loop without slowing, not looking left again. When he reached the entrance again, the cattle guard didn't clatter beneath him. That time, he noticed. He told himself he wouldn't try again. That this was the heat, or too much tequila, or his own damn brain playing tricks. But his fingers were already curling around the wheel the next night, already tracing that same worn arc before he could talk himself down. The fourth time, he counted the fence posts. Only for now, stretched out across what should have been a quarter-mile of fencing. The figure was back. Closer, standing in the dip in the road this time, half lit by the Bronco's high beams. No face, no movement. It's just there. He blinked, and it was gone. Back in town, he didn't sleep. He sat in his motel room with the TV, turned low, flipping channels and chewing nicotine gum until the sun came up. He tried to call his brother, but the line never rang. Just silence. His phone screen froze on the call log and wouldn't shut off until he pulled the battery. He tried driving east toward Marathon, but the car kept overheating. He got it checked out in Alpine, but the mechanic said there was nothing wrong. Just Old desert engines doing what they do. Still, Josh knew better. He could feel the pull, like something in his spine was being slowly twisted, nudged gently toward that last mile again. The fifth time, he waited until midnight. He left without his phone. He didn't tell anyone. The Bronco started without hesitation, purring steady, and the desert swallowed him whole. The sign had fallen completely by then. The posts were gone. The fence had vanished into the ground like it had never been hammered into the dirt at all. Halfway through the loop, the Bronco's headlights dimmed without flickering. Not a bulb, not the alternator, just dimmed. And when they came back to full power, the road was different. Narrower, the dip was deeper. The figure was standing at the edge now, right where the pavement crumbled into dry gulch. It had no features, just a long, gray outline, like smoke in the shape of a man. And as he passed it, Josh thought he heard something, not a voice, not words. More like the echo of his own breath, returning wrong at the loop's end. The cattle guard was gone, so was the desert. It was all dust and heat and silence. His headlights reflected nothing now. No brush, no fences, no sky. He turned around. Or tried to. There was no turn, just the road, so he drove it again. Sixth time, because what else could he do? At first, it looked the same. The Bronco still held the road. The tires hummed over the same cracks, dipped in the same curve. But everything outside the truck was wrong. The sky was black, not night black, but empty, starless, like driving inside a void. The mesquites were gone, replaced by twisted things that looked like wet rope draped over antlers. They moved. Not in the wind. There was no wind. They moved like breathing. The figure was everywhere now. Reflections in the windshield. Shadows in the side mirrors. Once in the passenger seat, just long enough for Josh to smell something burnt and sweet, like charred meat and flowers. He slammed the brakes and screamed, but no sound came out. His throat moved. Nothing followed. His ears were full of a sound like teeth grinding on aluminum. He lost time. When he came to, the Bronco was parked at the start of the loop again. Engine dead, tank empty. Door open. He didn't remember getting out, didn't remember stopping. The desert was gone. So was Terlingua. The road behind him was still there, waiting. Back in town, they found the Bronco a week later. The engine had no oil in it. The tires were worn to smooth rubber like it had driven for days without stopping. The seat was empty. The keys were still in the ignition. The rearview mirror had fallen off and lay on the passenger floorboard. Cracked down the center. They say the sheriff who found it left town a month later. Didn't say why. Just packed up and disappeared. Some folks say he saw Josh's name scratched into the inside of the windshield. Others say there was a voice recorder in the glove box with nothing on it but 5 minutes of silence. Then the sound of something breathing. No one's driven the final mile since. But some nights, especially in August, you can see the dust kick. Up out there near the fence line where the road should be. And every once in a while, someone swears they see a Bronco in town, parked by the old gas pump behind the bar. Same rust patterns, same cracked taillight, but no one ever sees the driver. Not anymore. He hadn't meant to take the trail, not really. Charlie was just trying to cut across Old Miller's ranch to get to his uncle's land before sundown. He'd done it before, years ago, when the old man still ran cattle and didn't mind neighbors. Taking the shortcut between the back fences, but Miller had passed in '09, and no one bought the place since. Every so often, folks whispered about the land bad soil. Broken fences, that one field where no grass grew, no matter how much rain came. But Charlie didn't believe in that kind of thing. He believed in engines, fence lines, and getting back to his truck before dark. The trail was dry and rutted. bordered by oak and mesquite, so thick the sunlight barely punched through. The kind of path a man could walk 1,000 times and still get turned around if he wasn't careful. Charlie had parked his four-wheeler just outside the rusted gate, the one with the private property sign hanging by a single chain, and stepped over like it was nothing. The wind kicked up a little dust as he did, and for just a second he thought he smelled something rotten, like meat left out in August. He chalked it up to a dead armadillo nearby and kept moving. The first sign was simple. Nailed to a cedar post with 2 bent nails, its paint cracked but legible. "Welcome." He paused long enough to wipe sweat from his brow and glance around. That sign hadn't been there before. He was almost sure of it. But it was an old trail, and his memory wasn't what it used to be. Charlie walked on, boots crunching gravel and twigs. The sound of cicadas humming, like a slow warning in the distance. About 20 minutes in, he realized he hadn't seen any of the familiar markers. No split fence post, no dry creek bed with the black stones, no swing gate by the barbed wire. Just trees and the same stubborn trail winding left, then right, then left again. He glanced at the sun, hadn't moved much, still hanging just past the tree line. Maybe he'd just lost track of time. He took a drink from his flask, then kept walking. The trail looped back around quicker than expected. He knew it. The second he saw the cedar post again, but the sign had changed. Same wood, same nails, but now it read, "Go back." The paint looked wet, fresh, like someone had just brushed it on. Charlie frowned, reached out to touch the letters, but stopped short. Something about it made his fingers pull back. The wind had died. No bird sounds now. Just the hush of trees and the tick of something small moving in the underbrush, unseen. He turned back, tracing his steps, but everything looked different. Same path, different trees. Or maybe the same trees arranged differently. The air was thicker now, like walking through warm syrup. His shirt stuck to his back. And then, about 15 minutes later, he came upon the sign again. This time, it didn't say anything, it just had his name, Charlie, painted in red, but it wasn't paint. He didn't need to touch it to know. It looked darker than blood, thicker too. Dripped a little at the bottom, like it had been slashed on by a shaking hand. He felt a bolt of nausea run through him. Something was wrong. More than wrong. He turned fast and started walking hard in the other direction, fighting the growing sense that every step forward was actually pulling him further in. That's when the trees started shifting, not moving. Exactly, but leaning. Bending slightly toward the trail. Like they were listening, or worse, watching. Charlie's breath grew short. His boots dragged like the dirt had gotten deeper. He passed a tree with what looked like claw marks on the bark, 5 deep gouges, down the trunk. Then another with something tied around an old length of rope, frayed and burned at one end. He told himself not to look closer, but his feet didn't listen. The knot was stained, dark and stiff. Something had been hung there a long time ago, but not long enough. He moved faster now. Not quite running, but walking like a man who's heard the snap of a twig behind him. The trail stretched longer each time he looked up. The bends grew tighter, then looser, then straight. Again, no logic, no map. And always, after a turn or two, the sign waited. Sometimes it said other things. Still here. Keep going. And once he swore, it changed as he looked at it read. Almost home. That one scared him most of all. He started seeing other things too. Fleeting shapes in the trees, pale arms retreating behind trunks. A flash of red. Eyes just above the tall grass. The air buzzed with something electric, like a storm was coming, but the sky never changed. Just that burnt orange glow bleeding through the canopy like a gaslight slowly dying. He tried marking the trees, scratched one with his knife, but when he came back around, there were dozens with the same mark. All fresh, all bleeding sap that looked a little too red. Charlie stopped. He stood still in the center of the trail and listened. The silence pressed in around him, and under it, something breathed. Not him, not the wind. Something deeper, lower, like the earth itself had lungs, and was exhaling beneath his boots. He whispered, "Let me out." No answer. He screamed it, shouted until his throat felt raw, but the trail only looped again, and the sign was waiting. It said, "We heard you." He didn't remember falling asleep, but he woke up on the dirt, head pounding, with dusk settling in like a bruise across the sky. The sign stood above him now, taller than before, as if it had grown while he slept. This time, it simply read, "Stay." He didn't. He got up, legs stiff, eyes scanning the trees for movement. He ran. He didn't care where? Just away. Away from the post, away from the trail, off into the brush if he had to. But the woods didn't let him. Every path led back to the trail. Every scramble through the trees ended in the same clearing, same curve of the dirt, same damn post. The sun wouldn't move. The birds didn't return. And the breath, whatever it belonged to, was getting closer. He found a phone in his pocket. Dead. Not low battery, just dead. Black screen, no buttons responding. He threw it. Land somewhere soft. Then nothing. It was full night now. Though the darkness felt artificial, heavy, like it had been painted on, he crouched under a tree and lit a cigarette with trembling hands. The lighter flame danced like it was afraid to. That's when he saw the figure. It stood just beyond the edge of the clearing. Thin, long-limbed, its face a smear of shadow. Watching, waiting. It didn't move, didn't speak. But when Charlie blinked, it was closer. Each time his eyes closed, even for a second, it gained a few feet, silent, patient, like it had all the time in the world. He stopped, blinking, sat there, eyes burning, smoke curling around him, heart pounding loud enough to drown out the cicadas that had returned, chirping, now in a strange, irregular rhythm, almost like a message in Morse code if he'd known how to read it. But he DN'd single quotes. Eventually, the figure was close enough to touch. Charlie didn't remember much after that. Just heat, whispers in a voice that sounded like his own, 1,000 signs hanging from trees, all with names he didn't recognize, and then one last one burned into the sky like a warning for whatever poor soul wandered in next. That one said, Charlie was here, but he wasn't. Not anymore.